Chapter 635. It's starting, it's starting. In the lounge, Lily's eyes lit up as she stared at the scene in the mirror. From the moment the ghost started to follow the vampire, Kieran had switched her vision over. The ghost stole the treasure from the vampire and was discovered by the vampire, resulting in a battle. This was the script she had in mind. Now that the script was finally playing out, it was time to place her bets. Who wins and who loses, place your bets. The lounge became restless again. However, it was indeed difficult to choose between the two sides in today's duel. Although Dake Dimming was the top student in the second year, Mr. Ghost was a top student in the fourth year. There was a gap of 2 years between them, and there was a considerable gap in knowledge. Even if the math professors were biased towards Dake, if they seriously calculated the odds of winning, Mr. Ghost seemed to have a higher chance of winning. Especially in this kind of real-time battle. Remember the URL. VIP, can't you? VIP. But the battle started faster than they expected. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Pride 3. When Dake discovered Mr. Ghost's tracks, he had already made preparations in advance. He suddenly swiped Pride 3 in his hand, and a dark golden light burst out from the card's surface and condensed into a pillar of light that soared into the sky. The little demonic beast that was enveloped by this pillar of light had a skull pattern between its eyebrows that transformed into the Pride emblem, and the dark golden light was sucked in like spring water. Its body turned into a body of light from the inside out, and its whole body rapidly expanded, and the bat wings on its back furiously spread out. In just an instant, the ferocious-looking demonic beast appeared with a roar. Its whole body was covered in black clothes, and only the pale skin around its mouth was exposed. The bat symbol imprinted on its chest emitted a scarlet light, and its 2 powerful arms reached down to its knees, and its hands had sharp demon claws that were as sharp as blades. Although it was only a 4-star magic fairy, the aura emitted by the demonic beast was abnormally strong. When Mr. Ghost's eyes showed signs of warning, the demonic beast's figure instantly disappeared without a trace. His expression abruptly changed, and his leisurely and relaxed appearance from before was completely gone. However, at this critical moment, Mr. Ghost made the best decision he could think of. He actually threw himself forward without hesitation. Almost at the same time, the demon beast, behind Kieran, used instant teleport and cast Death Claw at the spot where Kieran was standing. The huge and sharp demon claws suddenly extended and pierced through the air with the dense power of darkness. Whistling sounds could be heard in the blink of an eye. Ghost was now rolling to the side like a lazy donkey. While rolling, its right hand reached into the card pack. You don't talk about martial virtues. The sudden duel and sneak attack made him curse in his heart, but when he thought about how he was the one who stole, he couldn't say anything. However, when his finger finally touched the magic card, he suddenly heard the hidden snake's painful wail above his head. He suddenly raised his gaze and saw that the 6-star magic fairy, the hidden snake, had its neck pierced by the lion beast's sword. Although he dodged the demon beast's death claw, it hit the hidden snake's back without any hindrance. Even though the hidden snake's defense was as high as 2,500 points, the demon beast's sure kill skill couldn't cause fatal damage to it. However, when it was distracted, the lion beast seized this flaw and instantly pierced through its defense. Hidden snake. Mr. Ghost's nerves were stretched to the limit at this moment. He almost instantly ordered the hidden snake to cast its sure kill skill. The hidden snake, who had been severely injured, suddenly raised its head and wailed with a long sword in its neck. Woo! The baby-like wail seemed to pierce through one's eardrums. Dake couldn't help but cover his ears. Then, from the mouth of the hidden snake, a white mist was suddenly spat out. The fog expanded in an instant, enveloping the surrounding 4 to 5 meters. Dake completely lost sight of the interior, and couldn't help but frown. Fairy Ibu Moon Power. Fairy Ibu suddenly raised its head and opened its mouth under the command. The bright and holy moonlight instantly shone into the castle from outside. Its petite and cute body was bathed in the moonlight, and the ball of light formed by the moonlight in its mouth instantly became brighter. Its power doubled. Under normal circumstances, although the moon power's power wasn't weak, It couldn't break through the hidden snake's defense. However, under the moonlight, the moon power's power doubled, easily tore through the snow-white mist, but it didn't hit. The white mist was dispersed. The demon beast and the lion beast stood within it. Hidden Snake and Mr. Ghost disappeared in an instant. Where did they go? Dake suddenly turned his head, but he didn't find any trace of Mr. Ghost or the hidden snake behind him. In a duel without a defined area, once one side lost the will to fight, it was very likely that they would pull away and escape. Spider sense. Dake raised the spider pearl again and injected magic into it to release a white ray of light that resembled spider silk. Then, the 360-degree ray of light that had no blind spots immediately helped him sense the existence of Mr. Ghost and the hidden snake. They hadn't escaped. As a top student in the 4th grade, although Mr. Ghost often showed a cheeky face, his self-esteem wasn't inferior to the other students. He couldn't choose to escape in a duel with a second-year student. Above Dake's head, on the ceiling at an extremely high point, the hidden snake, who had grown a pair of wings of light at some point in time, was accumulating power and exploding toward Dake below. Mr. Ghost, on the other hand, was stuck to the ceiling in an extremely strange position. Only his hands were free, and his fingertips were holding several magic cards. By the time Dake discovered it, the invisible hidden snake had already swooped down, bringing with it a fishy wind. Dake's expression immediately changed, and he instantly gathered power under his feet and shot backward. Relying on the power he had gained from Chi training, the explosive power he displayed in that instant allowed him to successfully dodge the hidden snake's fatal attack. Beside him, Fairy Ibu controlled 2 ribbons and shot them upward. However, the difference in the basic strength of the 2 magic fairies was completely revealed at this moment. Although Fairy Ibu's ribbons had broken the hidden snake's invisible state, they didn't do anything to obstruct it at all. After the hidden snake lost its main target, it suddenly opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Fairy Ibu. Fairy Ibu was bitten by the bloody mouth and immediately began to struggle. Its passive skill, Charming Body, didn't show any reaction. The hidden snake's fangs pierced through its skin. Demonic Mimi, the dream demon floating on the side, suddenly let out a panicked cry. Then, the gem on its chest emitted a red light, and it used telekinesis on the hidden snake's bloody mouth in an attempt to open it. However, it wasn't of much use. Beast King Fist. Just as it was getting anxious, a reliable roar suddenly sounded in its ears. A shockwave in the shape of a lion carried a huge force and fiercely blasted the hidden snake's body. Although it didn't cause too much damage, it still sent it flying. The lion beast's tall figure appeared in front of Fairy Ibu, and its gaze was serious as it stared at the hidden snake that had landed on the ground again. The hidden snake, with the wings of light on its back, not only had it gained the ability to fly, but it had also clearly gained a certain degree of strength. On the ceiling, seeing that the situation had stabilized, Mr. Ghost couldn't help but say, "You scared me to death, heh? My reputation was almost destroyed in a single day." Dake raised his head and said sincerely, "Senior's reaction is really fast." Mr. Ghost said with a calm tone, "It's okay." Dake smiled and said, "Then Senior, you should be prepared this time, right?" Again? Mr. Ghost wanted to turn around at this moment, but he suddenly realized that there was no space behind him. He quickly turned his face back and held the magic card in his hand tightly as he hurriedly summoned. On the ground, Dake had already flipped his hand, and there was a bronze mirror in his hand. There were 4 small bronze snakes on the frame of this bronze mirror. It was the bronze snake lens. After holding the bronze snake lens, Dake's spirit was lifted, and his emotions became more agitated, and he seemed to be more impulsive. However, this feeling was suppressed in the next moment. He looked at Mr. Ghost, with a clear expression, raised the bronze snake lens in his hand, and slowly shone it at Mr. Ghost. In a formal duel, item cards had to be equipped in the hands of the magic fairy, and the target of the spell couldn't be the contestant on the stage. However, in a real duel, targeting the contestant was the most correct strategy. Although he didn't know how Mr. Ghost stuck to the ceiling, this action didn't actually make him safer. Once the bronze snake lens's petrifying gaze light shone on him, the duel would end instantly. However, after seeing Dake take out a mirror, Mr. Ghost decisively switched to another magic card and summoned again. Obviously, he had a certain degree of understanding of the effects of mirror items. When Dake injected magic into the bronze snake lens, to activate the bronze snake lens's ultimate skill, the petrifying gaze, Mr. Ghost also completed the summoning in an instant. At this moment, both sides made their moves. In the next second, the 4 small snakes on the bronze snake lens opened their snake eyes at the same time and stared at Mr. Ghost, who was above them. The magic card in Mr. Ghost's hand shone brightly, and an ink-black cloak instantly appeared in his hand. He put the summoned magic card into his sleeve, then suddenly grabbed the cloak and shook it. Under his control, the black cloak covered his body like a blanket, and the corners of the cloak were tightly pressed against the ceiling. Magic reflection cloak? In the lounge, Professor Lily instantly exclaimed in surprise. The rest of the professors also looked surprised. Obviously, the magic reflection cloak, summoned by Mr. Ghost, was just as surprising as the bronze snake lens summoned by Dake. It was like a game of rock, paper, scissors. If the bronze snake lens' petrifying gaze light was a rock, then the magic reflection cloak was a piece of cloth. It could be said that it was a perfect match. Therefore, at this moment, the professors who bet on Dake all looked regretful. Once the petrifying gaze light was shot back, Dake would lose completely. In this duel, the enchantment used to protect the students was very delicate. The effect caused by a petrifying skill would also be converted into an energy counter. If it could cause the duelist to lose the ability to fight, the energy counter would be instantly filled to 2,000 points. Of course, there were bound to be some errors. For example, the duelist might not be affected by the petrification, but the enchantment could not be evaluated, and it would still be filled to 2,000 points. In short, the safety of the students must be the priority. The professors calmly looked at the scene in the mirror. However, the gray light that shot out from the bronze snake lens was not reflected by the magic reflection cloak. Under the astonished gazes of the professors, the petrifying gaze light penetrated the magic reflection cloak and hit the enchantment that was tightly attached to the leather cover under the control of Mr. Ghost. The energy counter on the enchantment skyrocketed in an instant. From the original 0 points, it instantly skyrocketed to the blood-red upper limit of 2,000 points. Professor Mitya Bartholomew, who was also in the lounge but did not pay attention to Dake, suddenly frowned and pointed at a magic card on the table. The mirror in front of her also instantly switched from the point of view of Eudora Henley to the point of view of Dake Dimming. Then the enchantment on Mr. Ghost suddenly shone brightly, and the transparent surface abruptly turned into a staring mirror. The petrifying gaze light that shone on the enchantment was reflected by the mirror and shot toward the hidden snake on the ground that was being held back by the lion beast. The next second, this 7-star jade hidden snake was turned into stone by the reflected petrifying light. Seeing this, the professors turned to look at Professor Mitya almost at the same time. Professor Mitya raised her head and smiled at them. The duel in the castle ended. The petrifying gaze light of the bronze snake lens passed through the magic reflection cloak twice, but it only encountered a slight obstruction before passing through. Obviously, there was a difference in the level of the abilities of these two items. After all, this was an item card made with 3 points of greed, so it was not surprising that this happened. However, Dake didn't feel this way. He didn't even notice the effect of the magic reflection cloak. And because of the magic reflection cloak blocking his vision, he didn't see the changes in the enchantment. Instead, he was very puzzled by the petrifying gaze light that was suddenly reflected back. However, the words "duel ended" were displayed on the duel arena that was previously depicted. Dake paused, put away the bronze snake lens in his hand, and then took out the branch card. The branch card issued a prompt after the duel ended. The winner's name was also displayed on the card. "I won," Dake quickly thought, tried to reverse the result, and finally found some clues. He immediately smiled and said to Mr. Ghost above his head, "Senior, thank you for your gift." Mr. Ghost slowly lifted the magic reflection cloak. and his face, which was hidden under the snake man leather, looked pained. Compared to Dake below, he obviously knew what happened. The hidden snake that turned into stone below made him feel a lingering fear. When he thought that if there was no enchantment protection, he would be the one turned into stone, and his heart beat more and more violently. However, after he lifted the magic reflection cloak, he forced himself to calm down and said, "You won this time, but there won't be a next time." "Of course not," Dake said with a smile. "After all, my ability can only be used on the same person once." Mr. Ghost tapped the magic cards in his hand, and one of the magic cards emitted a white light that wrapped around him, and then slowly put him down. He gradually landed and said to Dake, "I didn't mean that." Dake smirked, "I know." Then he bent down and hugged Ibu, who had severely exhausted her magic power, and said to Mr. Ghost, "Time waits for no one. Senior, continue to find your next target. I'm going to the next resource point. Thank you again for your gift." After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and quickly left with the magic elves. Looking at Dake's back as he quickly left, Mr. Ghost gritted his teeth and took out the hidden snake magic card from his card pack. He was going to recall it and summon it again. This way he could refresh the status of the hidden snake and remove it from the petrification state. However, when he put the hidden snake back into the magic card, he suddenly froze and slowly raised his head. He had removed the summon, but the hidden snake was still standing in the field like a stone statue. "It can't be recalled?" At this moment Mr. Ghost's eyes suddenly widened, and then he suddenly turned to the direction Dake left. "Hey! Don't feed it, I can't do anything about it." Dake suddenly sped up and quickly fled. After being petrified by the bronze snake lens, it needed 5 minutes to automatically recover. During this time, even if a normal petrification removal potion was used, it would not be able to remove the petrification. And if the target of the petrification was the magic elves, they could not be recalled back into the card. Dake had already investigated this information through experiments. If Mr. Ghost did not want to leave the petrified hidden snake behind, then he could only wait at the side for 5 minutes. But this senior is so powerful, he should have other magic cards for concealment, right? Even without the hidden snake, he should still be able to follow and steal, right? Even if he doesn't, it's only 5 minutes. The activity time is 6 hours, and there are 72 5-minutes. 2 minutes later, Dake and Mr. Ghost put some distance between them and continued to search for the 8th resource point. Fairy Ibu had already been recalled back into the magic card and was replaced by the 3-star demon fox. He had already checked his credits. Just as he felt, Mr. Ghost was an outstanding student with great strength. He had obtained close to 8,000 credits in the activity, and of course, it was impossible for him to only rely on steal. And after Dake won the duel, he had obtained 800 credits in one go, making a killing. I wonder if he's a 4th or 5th year. Could I meet him in the golden competition? After the duel just now, Dake's hands were itching. That senior must be holding back his anger, wanting to win in a proper duel. Just as he was about to replenish the fairy Ibu's magic, Dake finally found the location of the 8th resource point. According to the map, this resource point was located in a corner of the castle, and not in a room. He carefully crept into this dark corner that no one cared about. Suddenly, his vision turned black, and he realized that the faint light had also disappeared in an instant. Although he had disguised himself as a vampire, he wasn't a real vampire after all. He couldn't see things in complete darkness. Thus, he subconsciously took a step back. The light returned in an instant. This is the puzzle of this resource point. Finding the key to the key point in complete darkness? Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he realized that he had arrived at the location of the resource point. But he did not go in again, and instead turned to look at the demon beast. The demon beast had not degenerated after its evolution. Although it could not be considered a vampire, it had a certain degree of night vision like the little demon beast. Although the lion beast also had this ability, it was still unable to see in complete darkness. In comparison, the demon beast was the darling of the darkness. To it, the darkness was like a mother's embrace, and it was like a fish in water. Hurry up, Dake urged. The demon beast's mouth curled up and it arrogantly said, "Leave it to me." Then it flapped its wings, and suddenly dived into the darkness. And the sound of its wings flapping suddenly disappeared as it continued to enter. Dake frowned and said in a low voice, "Even the sound is blocked?" Light and sound were the two main sources of information for humans to identify their environment. In an environment without light and sound, very few people could maintain a calm state of mind. Dake could not guarantee that he would not panic. I wonder who designed the mechanism of this resource point. He leaned against the wall, waiting patiently. But after waiting for 2 minutes, there was a roar that sounded like silk being torn apart. "Lion beast," Dake said calmly. The lion beast held the hilt of its sword, and was about to go forward. After being summoned, the demon fox, that had not participated in a battle yet immediately said, "Let me do it." Dake was a little surprised. "Are you sure?" The demon fox glanced at the lion beast, and said, "Give me the sword." The lion beast frowned, but still passed the single scabbard to it. The demon fox took the scabbard and narrowed its eyes slightly. It felt the power transmitted from the holy sword, and revealed a slight smile. Then it suddenly frowned and said, "I'll be back soon." Dark nodded and allowed it to attack with its sword. The demon fox was a magic guide spirit that specialized in magic power. Its magic power was more than 300 points of 3-star perfection. But its attack power was also 1,500 points. Its attack talent was maxed out. This single scabbard could give it an additional 900 points of attack. After the addition, it could reach 2,400 points. Although it was far from the Diru beast and the lion beast, if the opponent was a 5-star or 6-star magic guide spirit that was not good at defense, it could break through the defense. As long as it could break through the defense, the demon fox had the confidence to win. Dake leaned against the wall and continued to wait. On his right was a dead silence of darkness, but on his left was a battle that was gradually becoming more and more intense. The sounds of the battle between the demon fox and the ghosts could be heard frequently, and he could not help but divert his attention away from the darkness. But when the demon fox returned from the battle, the demon beast still had not walked out of the darkness. There are only 2 minutes left before the evolution ends. Dake could not help but squint his eyes. If it really did not work, he could only use another method to disperse the darkness in this corner. Although this method was definitely not in line with the purpose of the professors when designing this level, who told him to be only a second-year student. Dake looked at the darkness, and his mind was quickly thinking. There were many ways to disperse the darkness, but he could only think of 2 with the strongest effects. One was 2-star Ibu's field skill, Great Clear Sky Pride. The other was the Radiant Night Pearl, Surekill skill, Radiant Night Concubine. The Radiant Sun and the Bright Moon were the 2 magic treasures that could disperse the darkness. Just as Dake was thinking about this, his heart suddenly moved and he moved to the right. In that instant, the evil devil beast's body suddenly appeared beside him. Clearly it used instant transmission. "What's the situation?" Dake suddenly asked. The demon beast's appearance was very miserable. Even though its magic value did not decrease, its body was covered in all kinds of messy marks, and there was even some mucus-like disgusting mucus. The demon beast's face was tense, but it still said with its nose pointed to the sky, "There are many small things that can't be touched, don't mind them. I've already found the mechanism and completely dispelled it." "You've already dispelled it?" Dake was slightly surprised, and could not help but look at the darkness. But in that silent darkness, there was naturally no movement. The demon beast saw that he did not believe it, and hurriedly said, "It's a puzzle-like puzzle, a bit like the Huarong Dao you once mentioned. You need to move one of the puzzle pieces to the exit, and it's very difficult. Of course, it's not difficult for a great demon beast like me." All right, I believe you." Dake patted its shoulder, calming it down, and asked, "And then?" The demon beast's face reddened. "And then I'll immediately come out and inform by." In that instant, a slimy tentacle full of suction cups suddenly shot out from the darkness, and wrapped around the demon beast's legs. The demon beast was still talking when it was suddenly pulled inside by the tentacle. With its 2,000 points of attack power, it was completely no match for the tentacle, and was instantly dragged to the ground, and then pulled inside. It lay on the ground, and its huge claws scratched the ground. SSSS. The sound of the claws scratching the ground was unusually ear-piercing. The demonic beast raised its head and looked at Dark, its eyes filled with heartbreaking despair. But just as it was about to be pulled into the darkness, the time limit for its evolution was up. Pooh! The tall demon beast instantly degenerated into a small demon beast. Its legs that were wrapped around by the tentacle naturally disappeared. Ah! The small demon beast screamed, and hurriedly flapped its wings to escape into Dake's arms. Dake hugged it, and immediately retreated. The lion beast and demon fox adjusted their positions, and blocked in front of him to prevent the tentacle from attacking again. The corridor was completely silent. In the darkness that sealed off everything, even the sound of the monster's wriggling could not be heard. Looks like the demon beast has indeed solved the puzzle, and summoned the monster of this resource point. Dake's expression was somewhat serious. The tentacle's strength should be above 3,000 points of attack, and it was most likely a 7-star elite-level monster like the King of Spectres. It was not impossible to kill a 7-star elite-level monster, but if it only hid in that dark corner and did not come out, the difficulty of killing it would be at least 2 levels higher. In the end, do I still have to dispel that darkness? Dake reached into his card bag and decisively pulled out Fantasy Beast, Ibu and Pride 2-3. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Fantasy Beast Ibu. In the snow-white light of summoning, little Ibu's body gradually appeared. Dake carefully observed the darkness and quickly said, "After a while, use Great Clear Sky on that corner." Squeak. Although Ibu did not know what was in that dark corner, he still nodded resolutely. Dake waited until the cooldown of his normal summoning skills was over, and immediately activated Pride 2. As the light of Pride 2 shone down, Ibu's eyes became even brighter, rising from 1 star to 2 stars. Then, he gathered a bit of power, and spat out a ball of light that gathered the power of the sun at that dark corner. The ball of light entered the darkness, and was instantly swallowed. But when Great Clear Sky's effect completely activated, the darkness in that corner was dispelled like snow. Dake finally saw the situation in that corner clearly. On both sides of the corner, there were old tables and chairs. Some of the tables and chairs were pushed aside, revealing the props on the wall behind them. They were exactly the same as the demon beast's description. Beside the wall between the tables and chairs, there were 10 or so white specters floating in the air. Each specter had a funny expression, and they frequently let out strange cackles. When they stuck out their tongues, they were half the size of their bodies, and covered in wet mucus. There were also all kinds of strange toys scattered on the ground. It was clear that these 10 or so specters had used all kinds of toys to make the demon beast look so miserable. But from the fact that the demon beast could not do anything to them, they were not as weak as they seemed. But this was not the main point. The main point was the huge monster that was lying on the ground like a black shadow. The monster's body was like a huge hat, lying limply on the ground. The color of its body was completely black, and an octopus tentacle with suction cups extended from the bottom of its hat-like body. But when it slightly straightened its body, it could be seen that there were even more tentacles hidden under its body. Dake did not see it too clearly. The thing in that corner was exposed for a moment, but it was immediately swallowed up by the darkness that reappeared. Even the ball of light that released Great Clear Sky was completely swallowed up. Dake once again lost sight of the darkness. Squeak. Ibu immediately let out an angry cry. Dake said solemnly, "Even Great Clear Sky can't completely disperse the darkness? Will the same thing happen when I use Radiant Night Pearl?" At this moment, the fox demon beast in front of him suddenly said, "But I've already seen it." Indeed, seeing it clearly once is enough. Dake smirked and took out a new magic card from his card bag. He asked, "So are you ready, Fox Demon Beast?" The fox demon beast was energized and immediately said, "Of course." In that case, Dake placed the magic card between his index and middle finger and swiped it forward. Swipe the card evolve. Under the light of Bliss 3, the fox demon beast evolved into a 9-tailed fox. The 9-tailed golden fox suddenly raised its chin in the scattered light, and the blue flames at the end of its tail and feet suddenly rose. Its forehead and the upper part of its limbs had a Tai Chi pattern that symbolized Tao. The two antennae on its neck were like colorful ropes used for rituals, and the tip was like a golden bell. After it finished evolving, it immediately turned around and pounced on Dake, licking his face fiercely. Dake was already experienced and took half a step back. He was only licked but didn't fall down. Now is not the time to mess around, he said very calmly. Since that monster is hiding in the dark corner and doesn't dare to come out, then we'll attack it until it has no choice but to come out. The nine-tailed fox unwillingly turned around and faced the dark corner again. Then it began to accumulate power. From the tip of its 9 tails, blue fireballs appeared one after another. Under Dake's command, it released Ghost Fire Jade and Fox Fire Dragon at the same time. Boom! The 9 blue fireballs surrounded the giant blue fire dragon and blasted towards the dark corner. Although the fireballs and fire dragon completely lost their sound and light when they entered the darkness, there were still waves of heat coming out of the darkness. In the eerily quiet environment, the 9-tailed fox's attack did indeed cause damage to the monster hiding in the darkness. Dake squinted his eyes to observe and decisively ordered, "Next, Fox Lightning." The 9-tailed fox suddenly raised its head and released blue lightning at the center of the giant monster. A short thunder roar came to an abrupt end after the lightning shot into the darkness. Dake immediately said, "It's time. Let it have a taste of Tengu's power." The 9-tailed fox's 4 limbs stood up, and the blue flames under its feet rose fiercely, forming a terrifying energy ball with the flames all over its body. When the energy in the energy ball reached its peak, the 9-tailed fox suddenly threw it into the dark corner. The darkness swallowed the ball of light. However, the waves of heat produced by Tengu's explosion broke through the darkness. After a short period of silence, the loud explosion completely erupted. The floor beneath their feet shook. Although the darkness wasn't dispelled, the effects of the silence and light had already been riddled with holes. Dake comforted the exhausted 9-tailed fox and patiently waited for the tentacle monster's reaction. But 1 minute later, 2 minutes later, the aftermath of Tengu's explosion had subsided, and there were still no monsters coming out of the darkness. Dake put the 9-tailed fox back into the magic card, then grabbed the little devil beast on his shoulder and said, "Understand." "Understood." The little devil beast responded and flapped its wings to fly over. Then it went into the darkness again. In less than half a second, it came out again. The decadence just now had completely disappeared. Dake saw its excited expression and guessed the possible result. But the little devil beast rolled its eyes and went back in. And not long after, Dake's school card had a considerable amount of credits. The darkness, after the giant monster died, still didn't disperse. Another while later, the little devil beast flew out with a bunch of candies and a dark blue gemstone. After handing over the candies and gems in its claws to Dark, it proudly said, "Little devil beast, you've killed a 7-star monster. Little devil beast, you killed a 7-star monster." While the little devil beast was repeatedly bragging, Dake counted the number of candies and then checked the gemstone. This gemstone was the size of a palm and was extremely heavy. There seemed to be liquid flowing inside the gemstone. When he leaned close to his ear, he could hear the sound of waves. But its aura wasn't pure. It was mixed with the dark aura that Dake was more familiar with. Dark attribute plus water attribute? Dake couldn't help but frown. Logically speaking, this kind of gemstone that was rich in energy should be an excellent material to refine a magic elfin. But he couldn't think of a target with dark and water attributes for the time being. "I'll keep it first and look at it later. It will come in handy eventually. Even if it doesn't work, it'll be completely random. I haven't tried my luck for a long time." Thinking of this, Dake's eyebrows relaxed. He put away all the gemstones and candies, looked up and said to the little devil beast, "Calm down, it's time to continue." "Little devil." The little dream demon suddenly went from behind Dake to in front of him, then squeezed out a tentacle and pointed behind him. Dake was instantly alert. "Is there another ghost?" It wasn't a ghost. A senior student walked out from the direction that the dream demon was pointing at. He said in a low voice, "It seems that you've successfully conquered this resource point. What a pity. Brothers, it's the last few days of October. If you don't vote, the votes will expire. Don't waste it." Chapter 636. Could it be a seductress? Dake calmed down and sized him up carefully. The senior in front of him was wearing a blue-black tuxedo and a pair of shiny leather shoes. In short, below his neck, he was dressed very formally, but above his neck. First of all, the Prajna mask with 2 red blossoms on it made people feel powerless to ridicule him. Secondly, it was unknown what kind of fuel he used to make his hair a mix of 7 different colors, and it was even emitting fluorescent light. Just based on this outfit, Dake was very certain that this was definitely not a senior from the aristocratic academy. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to have any impression of him. The magical elf accompanying this senior was a ghost that was also wearing the same Prajna mask as him. However, unlike the senior's mask, the Prajna mask worn by his magic elf didn't have any messy blushes. The entire mask was ferocious and terrifying, as if it was directly grown on the face. There were 2 sharp horns on both sides of the magic elf's head, and its hair was abnormally lush. Apart from that, its body was completely enveloped in a wide robe, making it impossible to easily identify its species. Remember, https://m, VIP can't you? VIP don't worry, I'm not a seductress either. Seeing Dake's vigilant gaze, the senior chuckled softly. I just happened to bump into the same resource point as you. According to the rules of first come, first served, it belongs to you. So, I just watched from the sidelines for a while. In other words, if Dake couldn't conquer this resource point, he would take over. This didn't sound like there was anything wrong with it. However, Dake sensed the problem after thinking for a while. According to the senior's words, he had been watching from the sidelines for a while. However, if he hadn't walked out himself, Dake wouldn't have even noticed his existence. Moreover, unlike the ghost senior from before, he didn't seem to have used any concealment sure-kill skills. Generally speaking, such a situation would only occur between 2 people with a greater difference in strength. Dake realized that he might have encountered a tough nut to crack. He pondered for a moment and asked, "May I ask who this senior is?" However, the senior still chuckled in an unpleasant tone. "This is a masquerade ball. It's common sense to not ask the other party's identity, right?" Dake smiled and said. "But there are times when you really want to know. Isn't the original intention of a masquerade party to facilitate social interaction?" "Haha, you're right." The senior finally said, "5th grade House of Fools. Remember my name, Vern Morse, a name destined to shock the world." The 5th grade House of Fools actually has such a character? Dark muttered to himself as he looked at Vern Morse's back as he leisurely left. There was no conflict between the 2 sides, and Vern Morse did not show too much malice. Before understanding his opponent's strength, Dake didn't want to start a fight. But from Vern Morse's self-introduction, he was definitely not someone who was willing to be lonely. Such a person should be very outstanding. It was impossible for him to be penniless until now. Unless he had only recently obtained enough capital to cause such a change. Forget it, I'll definitely have more opportunities to observe him in the future. Dake shook his head and refocused his attention on the masquerade party. An opportunity like this year's masquerade party to obtain a large amount of credits was hard to come by. There are still about 5 hours before it ends at midnight. The fight for the resource points will become more and more intense. I have to work harder. Dake opened his school card, opened the 3-dimensional resource map, and continued to choose resource points on the 6th floor. Let's do this. After making a quick decision, he called the magic guide fairies to continue forward. After putting away Demon Fox and Illusory Beast, Ibu, he only had Lion Beast, Single Scabbard, Little Devil Beast, Magician Secretary, and Dream Demon by his side. But apart from the Lion Beast and the Scabbard, the other magic spirits didn't have much head-on combat capabilities. Thus, as he ran towards his target, he quickly thought of summoning another magic guide fairy. But at this time, his lack of high-star magic guide fairies became more and more obvious. In the end, Other than Fairy Ibu and Diru Beast, the only 4-star magic guide fairy left was Big Milk Jar. Let's do Big Milk Jar. Even though Big Milk Jar was not very aggressive under normal circumstances, it could still be used as a defense. With Lion and Scabbard as a sword and Big Milk Jar as a shield, it could barely attack and defend at the same time. On the way to the 9th resource point, they encountered 3 lone monsters, but they were all cleanly killed by Lion. During the process, Magician's Secretary used a normal summoning spell and successfully summoned Big Milk Can. Then, Big Milk Tank immediately used its ultimate skill, Milk Drink, creating milk that could recover half of its maximum mana. After drinking the milk, Lion Beast quickly recovered to its peak state. But when everything was ready, Dake found that the 9th resource point was empty. Looking at the empty resource point, he frowned and said, "Looks like this resource point has already been broken through. We can only go to the next one." He opened the resource map and quickly looked for the next target. After finding it, he sped up. However, this resource point had still been emptied by someone. It's getting harder and harder. Dake had no choice but to open the resource map again and look for the next target. From the 6th floor of the castle onwards, it was completely the domain of the senior students. Their ability to move and the speed at which they conquered resource points was not something that the junior students could compare to. Such a result could only be said to be expected. Dake was not discouraged. Finally, at the location of the next target, he found a resource point that had not been broken through yet. He let out a sigh of relief and immediately ordered Dream Demon and Big Milk Jar to guard outside. As for himself, he brought Lion Beast and Little Devil Beast into the classroom where the resource point was located. This was a rather large empty classroom. Apart from the podium, there was only a cupboard in the corner. Other than that, there was not even a table or chair. When Dake walked into the classroom, a magic wand on the podium suddenly stood up. Dake paused and cautiously held the magic wand. Then he immediately felt a suction force. Magic flowed into the magic wand through his fingers. As the tip of the magic wand emitted a bright light, Dake's right hand was lifted up by the magic wand, and then pointed at the blackboard. After a moment, the light of magic radiated toward the blackboard's blind spot. When the light dissipated, a total of 3 lines of words appeared on the blackboard. Is this a problem-solving level? Dake's heart suddenly understood. He immediately picked up the magic wand and quickly browsed through the questions. The first question is about the editing of the magic language. The second question is a mathematical problem. The third question is a comprehensive problem that combines the magic language and mathematics. After looking at the general model of the questions, Dake prepared to start from the first question and seriously solve it. But at this time, there was a sudden whistling sound outside the door. He subconsciously turned his head and saw a senior with thin wings on her back. She rode the wind and landed at the door. Both of them looked at each other and sized each other up. Fairy Princess, Illuri Clarissa. Dake recognized who it was at first glance and couldn't help but whisper. Illuri Clarissa was a 5th grade noble student. She was noble and had royal blood. She was known as the Shungmalian Fairy Princess. She had an otherworldly beauty like a fairy. As a famous celebrity duelist, Illuri Clarissa was impeccable in terms of family background, character, and personal strength. In addition, she also participated in Professor Kazayer's alchemy class. Illuri Clarissa was like Luosi. She wore a fairy's makeup. Her long blonde hair was tied into a ponytail. Her bangs were light and her eyelashes were long. Her face was delicate and her figure was slender. So it's Junior Dake Dimong. Illuri Clarissa took the initiative to greet him after sizing him up. Dake had to temporarily put down the wand in his hand and responded, "Hello, Senior. I didn't expect to meet you here. There's something even more unexpected." Illuri Clarissa raised her hand with a smile and suddenly showed her school card. "Sorry, I'm a genuine fairy." The fairy princess was a fairy. It was as reasonable as a vampire being a vampire. Dake was speechless. He immediately turned his head to look at the blackboard again and carefully read the first question. On the other hand, Illuri Clarissa chuckled softly and quickly entered the classroom. She glanced at the 3 questions on the blackboard and saw another wand on the podium. She reached out and grabbed it. Then, in the middle of the blackboard, under the question, there was a vertical line that went all the way to the end, dividing the entire blackboard into two areas for answering questions. She used the wand to push aside the blonde hair on her temples, and went to Dake's right side, and began to read the question. A competition that purely tested one's academic ability had begun. In the professor's lounge, several mathematics professors looked at each other. Professor Eric, who was in the 4th year, suddenly asked, "Who came up with this question?" "I'm talking about the third question." But the professors all shook their heads. Only Lily proudly said, "Of course it's me. How is it?" "It's okay." Professor Eric immediately smiled and said, "So it's Lily who came up with the questions, then it's okay. Let's guess who can solve these 3 questions faster than me? By the way, Winifred, Clarissa is your student, right? I don't remember you teaching mathematics in your class." Professor Winifred, who was in the 5th year, was about the same age as Professor Eric, about 50 years old. He touched his red nose and shook his head. "Of course Clarissa is my student, and I didn't teach mathematics directly. But since I've already read mathematics, it's natural for me to touch on some mathematical ideas after teaching." Eric nodded. "That's interesting. It seems that Clarissa has a big advantage." But Professor Winifred said again, "You can't say that. Lily's second question obviously involves some kind of formula. Even if Clarissa can solve it with an earthwork method, Dake Dimming, who wrote these formulas himself, will definitely be faster. I have my reservations." The other professors also agreed. Clarissa's level of magic language was higher than Dake's. Dake's level of mathematics was higher than Clarissa's. Both sides had an equal advantage. Before the final result of this academic competition came out, it was impossible to determine who would win. The professors were all talking and laughing as they watched the two solve the questions through the mirror. The process of solving the questions was similar to what the professors expected. Dake was at a disadvantage in solving the first question. While he was still thinking hard, Clarissa had already solved it quickly. The fairy princess, who temporarily stopped solving the question, could not help but blink at Dake on her left. Dake's expression changed. His eyes instantly became serious, and his thinking speed became faster. His level of magic language was indeed not as good as Clarissa's, but as long as he solved this question, he would be able to catch up with the second question. Eliza Clarissa chuckled again, and read the second question seriously. Then her eyebrows gradually frowned. Phew. Finally, Dake successfully solved the first question. After he stopped, he glanced at Clarissa on his right, and found that she had a serious expression on her face. She was writing rapidly on the blackboard about the solution to the second question. He was very curious about what Clarissa wrote, but when he looked from the side, he could not see the handwriting at all. It was obvious that some kind of anti-spying magic had been cast. Then she shouldn't be able to see my handwriting. After Dake understood, he immediately focused on solving the second question. The second question was so simple that it made people speechless. He only spent less than 2 minutes to solve it completely. In terms of solving speed, he completely overwhelmed Clarissa. And he only solved a small part of the problem. The last question. After confirming that Clarissa was still solving the second question, Dake's heart completely calmed down. He looked at the third question with full concentration. The third question was obviously more complicated than the first 2 questions, and the difficulty of solving it was also 2 levels higher. When he finished reading it for the first time, he was not even sure if he could solve it. And if he could not solve it, then the advantage he built on the second question would collapse in an instant. But he did not panic. At this time, the more anxious he was, the more mistakes he would make. If he still could not solve it with all his strength, then he just had to admit that his level was not enough. This was not something to be ashamed of. Without accumulating small steps, there was no way to travel 1,000 miles. Without accumulating small streams, there was no way to form a vast sea. Learning was not something that could be done in one step. What he lacked was only time. But with this stable state of mind, Dake quickly found the way to solve the problem. He picked up his magic wand and wrote on the blackboard very smoothly. When Clarissa finally solved the second question by relying on the traditional method, Dake had already solved most of it. Clarissa took a deep breath. Her previous ease had long been thrown to Java. As a fifth-grade top student, she certainly could not accept that she lost to a second-grade student in academic ability. As the pure magic power poured into her brain, her eyes lit up, and her thinking became extremely clear. The speed of her thinking suddenly accelerated. She used the experience of solving the second question and directly applied it effectively to the third question. The professors in the lounge immediately noticed Clarissa's acceleration. The outcome of this academic competition had once again become complicated and confusing. The competition between Dake and Clarissa instantly heated up. Although there was no smoke, it was still like entering a battlefield. Dark's magic elves could feel the tense atmosphere in the classroom, and they were all secretly encouraging the students. During this time, some people came to the door of this resource point, but after seeing the fairy princess in the classroom, they all shook their heads and left. They obviously did not think that Clarissa could not conquer this resource point. As time slowly passed, Dake and Clarissa's solving progress was quickly approaching the end. Although Clarissa started to solve the third question later, she showed a trend of catching up. Dake was steadily advancing, relying on the advantages left in front to take the lead. Whoosh! At that moment, both sides stopped writing almost at the same time. Then they subconsciously turned their heads to look at each other, their eyes flashing sharply. Who won? The professors and magic elves all immediately perked up and stared intently. In this situation, they could only rely on the mechanism itself to make a judgment. Under the gaze of so many pairs of eyes, Dake's magic wand lit up, while Clarissa's magic wand turned gray. Even the answer she left on the blackboard turned into dust and scattered with the wind. The loser exited. I actually lost? Clarissa's eyes flashed with an unknown color. However, her good upbringing allowed her to maintain a smile on her face. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Dake's magic wand suddenly vibrated violently. The lion beast immediately calmed down from the joy of empathizing with Clarissa and pressed his big hand on the hilt of his sword. Big Milk can also jogged to Dake's side and looked up with a solemn expression. Dake quickly turned around and said to Clarissa, "Senior, please leave for a moment." Okay. Clarissa took a deep breath. However, before she left the classroom, she still asked unwillingly, "How did you solve the second question so quickly?" Dake grasped the magic wand in his hand and said simply, "I only know a little mathematics." Mathematics? Clarissa felt that she had heard of this term before, but she had never paid much attention to it. "If you have any doubts, let's talk after the event." Dake couldn't hide the smile on his face, but he really couldn't suppress the magic wand in his hand. Clarissa glanced at the magic wand and said, "Okay, after the event." "Okay," Dake casually replied. The magic wand in his hand suddenly shot up, completely out of his control. On the other hand, Clarissa took a step forward and exited the classroom as light as a feather. She watched as the magic wand flew up and hit the ceiling. Then black mucus dripped from the magic wand. She turned around and left quickly, unusually decisive. Prepare for battle. On the other hand, Dark suddenly shouted and quickly retreated to the door. The black mucus dripping from the magic wand formed a circle on the floor in the middle of the classroom. The viscous liquid spread out at an extremely fast speed, forming an ink-like black pool. A worm-like monster slowly emerged from the black pool. The surface of the monster's body was bubbling like boiling water. The bubbles emitted a pungent smell like sulfuric acid. Its body was more than 1 meter in diameter. After it completely emerged from the black pool, it was at least 10 meters long. The magic wand on the ceiling finally fell down and fell on the head of the huge black worm. In the blink of an eye, the black mucus wrapped around the wand and turned it into a pitch-black horn dripping with mucus. Giant abyssal worm. Dake swallowed his saliva and recognized the origin of this huge black worm. According to the records of a book, this kind of creature lived in an extremely harsh environment underground. The black mucus secreted from their body was extremely difficult to decompose. It could remain underground for hundreds of years without fading. Therefore, some people would mix the mucus into ink and use it to write important books. However, Dake didn't know much about this kind of giant abyssal worm. He only knew that the giant abyssal worm was the nightmare of the goblins. It had destroyed countless goblin tribes. The giant abyssal worm in front of him was at least a 7-star elite monster. Next, it was a direct battle with the giant abyssal worm. In the lounge, Professor Bacon whispered to Lily, "You made this giant abyssal worm?" "Of course." Lily nodded proudly. Professor Bacon's expression changed. He couldn't help but ask, "Don't tell me you have worm silver?" "Yes, it's in here." Professor Lily pointed at the mirror and said. Professor Bacon was stunned. At this time, Dake was quickly commanding the lion beast to fight back. The giant abyssal worm's skin was thick. Its defense was estimated to be above 3,300 points. Its attack wasn't that high among the 7-star magic elves, but it wasn't too low either. Its mana was definitely higher than normal because it was strengthened. The crafting technique of this kind of one-time use magic elves was much more advanced than normal crafting, but if one could master it, the crafting process would be much less than normal crafting. However, one-time use magic elven cards couldn't be stored for a long time, so they couldn't be stored. For example, all the monsters in tonight's masquerade party could only be stored until midnight. The professors could also forcibly inject magic power into their bodies regardless of the cost to make their health bar longer. Judging from the 3 measurements, the giant abyssal worm would definitely crush the lion beast. Except for its attack. The lion beast's attack was as high as 3,800 points after it was equipped with the single scabbard. If it tried its best, it might be able to defeat the giant abyssal worm. Sword dance. When the battle started, Dake decisively gave the order to use the sword dance. Roar. The lion beast roared fiercely, and its aura reached its limit. The single scabbard in its hand was surrounded by violent airflow. The airflow grew stronger as it moved forward, and it eventually formed a storm around its body. After the lion beast got close, it leaped up and slashed down with its sword with both hands. This slash had 6,100 points of power. It carried a horrifying aura that was about to split the giant abyssal worm in half. The giant abyssal worm felt threatened, and let out a sharp insect cry. The horn on its head was surging violently, and it slightly bent down and fiercely slashed at the lion beast. Bang! The moment the lion beast's horn clashed with the sword, it moved the single scabbard slightly to the side, and avoided the sharpest tip of the horn. Then, it cut into the horn like cutting tofu and continued to slash down amidst the accumulated sounds of friction. It had actually split the horn in half. The lion beast's sword didn't stop there. After splitting the horn, it continued to slash at the giant abyssal worm's head. Its black shell was completely split open, and its pink soft flesh was exposed. Amidst the screams, the giant abyssal worm controlled the black slime flowing on its body and crazily rushed up to its head, flowing into the wound that the lion beast cut open. The slime quickly solidified and forcefully stuck the single scabbard's blade. The lion beast held the hilt and couldn't pull it out. It immediately let go of its right hand and punched out. Beast King Fist. Although this punch didn't have the bonus of the single scabbard's attack power, the shockwave rushed into the giant abyssal worm's wound and still caused considerable damage. The giant abyssal worm's high defense was reflected on its outer shell, and its inner shell was also soft. The key was that the tissue that stuck to the blade was also shattered. The lion beast used the reaction force from the Beast King Fist and stepped on the giant abyssal worm's head. Finally, it successfully pulled out the sword. It adjusted its posture in the air and quickly landed. Then it charged forward again without stopping. At this time, Dake had already summoned the war horn and handed it to the milk-kin, who was eager to try. Moo moo, the milk-kin was happy to get a treasure. It immediately picked up the war horn and blew it with all its might. Woo-woo, in the long sound of the war horn, the milk-kin triggered the war horn's war roar. Behind it, there seemed to be an illusion of a battle-hardened soldier. A giant rhinoceros raised its head and roared. That roar was as loud as thunder, and it made the giant abyssal worm's ferocious aura stagnate. The lion beast felt its anger rising in the roar. A flash of madness appeared in its eyes, and a surge of energy burst out from its body. Its strength skyrocketed, and its attack power increased by another 300 points. His normal attack power of 4,100 points cut open the giant abyssal worm's shell again, and almost cut half of its body in half. The giant abyssal worm howled in pain, and its thick tail violently swung at the lion beast. However, the lion beast agilely leaped into the air and dodged the sweeping tail. The giant abyssal worm's attack failed, and it suddenly opened its mouth. Black ripples appeared in its mouth, and a giant water column was instantly shot out. The water column continued to shoot out. Although it didn't hit the lion beast at first, the giant abyssal worm suddenly turned its head, and the water column moved horizontally. Finally, it hit the lion beast. The lion beast blocked the water column with the single scabbard at the critical moment, but how could a long sword block the water column? Its mana instantly plummeted, and its entire body was blown away and smashed into the wall. Ing! The giant abyssal worm let out a ferocious cry, and then swung its tail and chased after the lion beast. The lion beast slid down from the wall, but the sword in its hand was still very stable. Moo! The milk can threw out a bottle of milk. It raised its hand and caught it. It poured all of it into its mouth, and its mana that had dropped by half was instantly replenished. Healers had always been an indispensable part of the boss raid. Although the milk cans drink milk had a long cooldown, Dake had made a lot of surekill skill cards for it. In this kind of real battle, it could provide endless supplies for the frontline warriors. No matter how long the giant abyssal worm's HP bar was, it couldn't have as much milk as the milk can. In this battle, after it failed to kill the lion beast in one hit, there was no suspense anymore. It took a few minutes. The lion beast finally pierced through the giant abyssal worm's head with its sword, and this fierce battle completely ended. The giant abyssal worm's huge body fell down after its mana was exhausted. Its huge body disintegrated into countless mana light spots and scattered in all directions. And at its head, a gift box floated in the air. The lion beast took a deep breath, grabbed the gift box in its hand, and walked towards Dake. It took a long time to conquer this resource point. Dake took the gift box and said in a low voice, "I hope this gift box can give me some compensation." As he said that, he carefully opened the gift box and revealed the hidden inside. Worm silver. Looking at the worm silver, that looked almost the same as the silver, Dake was instantly moved. This piece of worm silver emitted a strong bug-type energy wave, and it was shocking. Although the dark attribute plus water attribute gem that he had previously obtained was of the highest quality, compared to this worm silver, it was instantly inferior. I remember that this kind of silver that is rich in bug-type energy is called worm silver, right? Dake's eyelids twitched as he couldn't help but say, "The professors are so generous." Worm silver's status among bug-type materials was like mithril's status among silver ores, and its rarity made its value even higher than its actual value. Only the Shungmalian Academy, which was sitting in the dungeon, could give out such an item as a reward in the event. Dake's face was extremely surprised as he resealed the worm silver and stuffed it into his backpack along with the gift box. This piece of worm silver didn't have any aura of other attributes, and it was a pure bug-type material. It could be used as the refining core of any bug-type magic elf. After the event ended, he needed to think carefully about which insect-type magical guiding spirit he should refine into. I wonder if I can refine a green caterpillar that can evolve into a void ripper? Dake walked out of the classroom with a smile on his face. After that, he continued to look for unconquered resource points. However, the number of upperclassmen on the 6th floor seemed to be increasing, and the resource points that were distributed on this floor were being fought over by many people, so his harvest wasn't ideal. Could it be that the resource points on the 7th, 8th, and 9th floor are too difficult to conquer? After being robbed once again, Dake couldn't help but think this way. He spent a lot of time on the 6th floor, and not only did he encounter a few 5th-year students, he even saw a few 6th-year students. And after he obtained the worm silver, he was only lucky enough to snatch a resource point. Although the puzzle of the resource point was also very difficult, it was exactly what he wanted. It was a checkpoint related to equipment refinement. After he broke through it, he used the lion beast as the main force to defeat the elite-level ghost in this resource point. It was a mummy hidden in a coffin. Other than its damage immunity ability, which was very troublesome. It didn't pose much of a threat to him. However, the lion beast was already exhausted after this battle. Dake put it away and replaced it with the Diru beast. Other than the lion beast and the Diru beast, the only magic elf he had that could continue fighting was the young blue-eyed dragon. But the young blue-eyed dragon wasn't that useful. After the 7-star mummy was killed, it dropped another soul bead. Soul bead was a type of ghost-type material, and a few more wouldn't be too much. However, the quality of this soul bead was much inferior to the one dropped by the King of Spectres, so Dake didn't have much hope for it. Time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the 8 o'clock bell rang from the direction of the spiral clock tower. Dake had broken through a total of 10 resource points, and he was still halfway to the bottom line of 20 resource points. Since the 6th floor of the castle was almost cleared by the upperclassmen, he had to make a choice. One was to break through the 20 resource points as soon as possible and explore the resource points on the lower floor of the castle. The other was to pursue the higher quality resources given by the resource points and explore the higher floors. The difficulty of solving the checkpoints on the 6th floor of the castle is already very high. The elite level ghosts summoned in the end are basically 7-star. Based on this, the elite level ghosts summoned in the 7th floor should be 8-star. Elite level ghosts are weaker than boss level ghosts, but because it's limited to one person, the difficulty isn't much lower. But from my point of view, I have the ability to kill an 8-star elite ghost alone. The problem is, can I solve the puzzle before summoning the 8-star ghost? And how do I deal with the normal ghosts that I encounter along the way? I might encounter a group of 7-star ghosts on the 7th floor of the castle. If it's not a fiend or a dark-type ghost, the Diru beast will have a hard time dealing with it. Even the green-eyed baby dragon won't be much different. If I encounter a situation where I need to use the Godhead armament or pride, it'll be very bad. But it's not like I don't have a way to deal with it. Dake calmed down and thought carefully. He had basically considered all the things that he needed to consider. In the end, the super rare worm silver appeared in his mind. Knowing that he still had the strength to fight, he chose to go up to the next floor. It's 8 o'clock now. If I can complete the checkpoints on the 7th floor before 8:30, I'll consider it a success. After that, I just need to leave enough time to go to the lower floor to make up for the resource points. Dake patted his cheeks and opened the resource map. Using the map, he found the nearest staircase and quickly went up. This time, he was not unlucky enough to encounter a trap on the stairs. He successfully reached the 7th floor of the castle. When he reached the 7th floor, the number of students that he could see with the naked eye decreased. However, what surprised him was that the number of normal ghosts that he encountered on the way decreased as well. It was as if there was more than one person on the 7th floor clearing out these ghosts. Speaking of which, 7-star ghosts are worth 200 credits, 8-star ghosts are worth 300 credits, and 9-star ghosts are worth 400 credits. If I had the ability, I'd definitely join in the fight. This year's masquerade ball is a complete carnival. Dake sighed and only took a handful of candies in his hand. If he scattered these candies on the normal ghosts, they would temporarily lose the desire to attack. However, as Dake did not spend too much time clearing out the normal ghosts this year, he did not obtain many candies. He had to use them sparingly. As he was a second-year student, there were not many high-level resource points that were allocated to him on the resource map. There were only symbolic ones on the 8th and 9th floors. There were slightly more on the 7th floor, but it was still in the single digits. Therefore, his options were actually very limited. Following the guidance of the map, Dake unexpectedly quickly found the first resource point on the 7th floor, but there was someone inside. He glanced at the door and found that the person inside was actually the Evernight Baron, Noah Sharp. Therefore, he could only roll his eyes and set off for the second resource point. After running for a long time, he felt a little tired. On the way, he encountered a few normal ghosts that were jointly killed by the magical spirits, which gave him some credits to express his gratification. Then he finally found the location of the second resource point. However, this resource point had long been cleared out. You can't do the same thing more than 3 times. Dake took a deep breath and continued searching. At about 8:20 a.m., He finally found the third resource point in the familiar bathroom. Very fortunately, this resource point had not been conquered. Unfortunately, someone else had found this resource point at the same time as him. Therefore, once again in front of the bathroom, he met a senior student. "You are Dake Dimming?" A sixth-year senior student who was wearing a school uniform at the masquerade ball curiously stared at his face. Dake observed the senior's uniform and said speechlessly, "It's me. Senior, are you from the Aristocrat Academy? I don't think I've seen you in the common lounge before." "Of course you can't see me in the common lounge of the Aristocrat Academy." The senior tugged at the uniform of the Aristocrat Academy and smiled proudly. "After all, I'm from the Knight Academy." Dake was indeed surprised, but he quickly asked with a fluke mentality, "Then senior's grade?" The senior who was wearing the uniform of the sixth-year Aristocrat Academy smiled and said, "Of course I'm a sixth-year student." "Dake, there are only 3 days left in October. Please vote for me. If possible, vote for the minimum blade too. After this month's monthly vote and blade will expire." Chapter 637. 6th Grade of the Knight Academy. Of course, not all the 6th grade students were good at duels, but the 6th grade students who could move freely on the 7th floor of the castle were definitely not easy to deal with. It was obviously a foolish move to confront such an opponent head-on. But to retreat, of course, it was impossible. In Dake's resource map, there were only 4 resource points on the 7th floor. 2 of them had already been occupied, so there was only 1 left, and the last one had yet to be found. Considering the current situation on the 7th floor, the possibility of the last resource point being occupied was very high. This meant that if he chose to retreat at this time, it was very likely that he would miss the last opportunity. Then through a transaction? Dake frowned slightly. This was obviously unrealistic. Since that was the case, he could only snatch it. Website. https://m, but can't you? VIP at this moment. He was less than 5 meters away from the washroom door. About a 60-degree angle with the washroom door. The senior from the Knight Academy was on the other side of the washroom, also about a 60-degree angle with the door. The distance between her and the washroom door was about 4.5 meters. Both sides were very close to each other. If it wasn't for the fact that they happened to encounter each other, they would have already entered the washroom. Dake's fingers moved slightly. Now that the cooldown of Pride 3 was over, if he activated it immediately, it would take 1 second to pull it out from the card pack. Usually it would take 3 seconds to summon it, and it would also take time for the little fiendish beasts to evolve into fiendish beasts. Even if he could immediately use instant transmission to enter the washroom, it would take a lot of time. Perhaps it would be better to gather chi and run directly into the washroom. However, the advantage of using instant transmission was that it could effectively avoid the other party's interception methods. At the same time, if he could also use some methods to obstruct the other party, he would be able to seize the initiative. Wait! Suddenly, Dake noticed a problem. Where's her magic guide sprite? The moment he thought of this, Dake immediately became alert. However, the senior from the Knight Academy smiled sweetly. Sorry. In the next instant, a dazzling green light shone beneath Dake's feet. Countless vines appeared from the light, intertwining with each other and rising to the sky. In the blink of an eye, they weaved into a huge pillar-shaped cage. As for the senior, she quickly ran toward the bathroom door. A distance of 4.5 meters could be covered in a single breath. After running 2 steps, she turned her head to take a look leisurely. However, it was this one glance that caused her to miss the opportunity that was right in front of her. Through the gaps between the vines, she suddenly saw the white cat that had once shone brightly on the duel stage, and her eyes met with the cat's. The amber-like cat's eyes suddenly emitted a light similar to the crimson wheel, causing her brain to produce an intense dizziness at that moment, and her consciousness instantly fell into chaos. Ultimate skill. Cat's eyes. By the time she woke up from her temporary confusion, Dake Dimming, who was trapped in the cage, had already disappeared. Oh no! Patricia Bullen shuddered violently, and the surging magic immediately dispersed the remaining chaos in her brain. However, when she turned to look into the bathroom, she found that the blonde young man dressed as a vampire was already standing at the door, smiling warmly at her. "Senior, thank you for letting me win." Dake raised his hand and politely waved. Behind him, the demon beast pressed its hand on his shoulder. A woman's mouth. Patricia Bullen wasn't a sore loser. She took a deep breath and stretched out her hand. The huge cage of vines quickly disintegrated and shrunk into a small dark green snake. The small snake shrank and bounced into her palm. It raised its head and kept flicking its tongue at Dake. "I will most likely stay in school this year. I hope to see you on the duel stage before I graduate." After leaving behind this sentence, which was roughly equivalent to "the green mountains will not change, and the green water will flow forever," Patricia Bullen was about to turn around and leave. However, Dake opened his mouth and asked, "May I ask Senior's name?" Patricia replied, "Patricia Bullen, 5th year, Magic Device Institute." After hearing this, Dake could not help but be surprised. Magic Device Institute? Isn't it the Night Institute? And 5th year? Patricia raised her hand and pointed above her temple. She said coquettishly, "Of course I'm lying to you, idiot." Dake. After confirming that Patricia Bullen had indeed left, Dake relaxed a little. A girl's words could not be trusted. He had a deep understanding of this and had the dream demon and the milk can temporarily guard the door. Then he took the Diru beast and the demon beast and turned around to walk into the bathroom. However, after taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and frowned. Magic Device Institute, 5th year? Isn't that the same year as Panduola Senior? Splash. The sudden sound of water interrupted his thoughts. He turned around to look at the source of the sound and noticed that the faucet of the sink had been turned on. The clear liquid that flowed out of the faucet quickly filled the sink. Then the faucet of the first sink automatically turned off. The faucet of the second sink was turned on and water continued to flow out. After a while, the 2 sinks were completely filled. Dake walked to the edge of the sinks and looked at the sinks with a puzzled expression. The sinks were calm and clear. There was no mystery behind them at all. However, under normal circumstances, the puzzle-solving mechanism of this resource site should be in the sinks. 2 sinks, is it a choice between the 2? Just as he was thinking this, the surface of the 2 sinks rippled at the same time. A stream of water flowed out of the sinks and slowly transformed into 2 human-shaped water spirits. The left side was flat, male. The right side was bumpy, female. Just as Dake was alarmed, the female water spirit on the right opened her mouth and said in a soft voice, "Vampire, please answer the question." Then the male water spirit on the left repeated, "Vampire, please answer the question." Dake looked around and couldn't make a choice. The 2 water spirits called him vampire the moment they opened their mouths. It should be the information from the branch card. It should be the identity he currently had. Since the branch card was the key to activate the checkpoint, it was normal for this part of the information to be leaked. Dake didn't have any doubts about this. However, there must be a reason why the water spirits called him vampire. It seems like their questions will most likely be related to vampire. Dake muttered, "Do you want me to choose one of you to answer the question? What's the difference between your questions?" However, the 2 water spirits still mechanically said, "Vampire, please answer the question." Dake couldn't help but think, since the student is asked to choose one of the 2, there must be a difference. The professors won't say things without thinking. There must be a difference between the questions of these 2 water spirits, and it's a difference that can be determined before the choice is made. But the only difference between them is their gender. Could it be the difference in gender? One needs to answer a question related to a female vampire, and the other needs to answer a question related to a male vampire. Dake's eyes flashed as he caught the key point. Then he decisively chose to answer the question related to a female vampire. "You." He reached out his finger and poked the female water spirit's forehead. Suddenly, a cool feeling flowed from his fingertip into his heart, making him feel a little comfortable. "Pada." The male water spirit on the left suddenly collapsed. The female water spirit on the right said, "Question 1. Who is the greatest female vampire in history? Please say her name in 30 seconds. Dake. He never thought that the water fairy would ask such a question. But if it was the greatest vampire, there shouldn't be anyone greater than the true ancestor of vampires, right? But the true ancestor of vampires wasn't just one. Even Dake, who had limited understanding of vampires, knew that the true ancestor of vampires was inherited. Then the answer was the first true ancestor of vampires? But the question was the first true ancestor a female? What was her name? Can you ask a question that a normal person can answer? If I knew the name of the first true ancestor, I wouldn't be standing here answering your question. 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. Dark died before he could even start the battle. He was defeated on the first question. But the water spirit didn't announce his failure. Instead, she continued to ask the second question. Question 2. How long does a female vampire's fangs change? Please answer within 30 meters. The exact time will be measured in years. After Dake heard this, he couldn't help but complain. There's a difference between male and female teeth? Is a male's fangs change shorter than a female's? But he was very clear about the answer to this question. After all, he did research on vampires' fangs. So he directly said 100 years. Correct. The water spirit raised her 2 small hands and clapped. She continued. Question 3. How long does a female vampire's pregnancy take? Please answer the question within 30 seconds. Dake raised his eyebrows and said decisively, It's very difficult for vampires to give birth. Generally, a female vampire's pregnancy time is 3 times that of a normal human's. That's 280 days multiplied by 3, which is 840 days. If 30 days is a month, then it's 28 months. Correct. The water spirit clapped her hands mechanically again. Question 4. Dake chose the question of a female vampire from a male and a female vampire. Of course, there was a reason. In order to take care of the vampire's daughter Victoria, he specially looked up relevant information. Moreover, even if he didn't look up, he could speculate the answers to some questions from Victoria's behavior pattern. The following questions were difficult and easy. He could at least answer some, and even if he couldn't, he tried his best to guess the answers. He really guessed a lot of the answers. When the water fairy finally stopped asking, he had already answered 30 questions. In the end, the water spirit said, The time for answering questions is over. The number of questions you answered correctly is 19, the number of questions you answered incorrectly is 9, and the number of questions you gave up is 2. A correct answer will add 1 point. A wrong answer will deduct 1 point, and no points will be deducted if you give up. The final score is 10 points. If the final score is 10 or more, you will be evaluated as a pass. Congratulations, you have successfully passed this round. Please wait for a moment. Wait, points will be deducted if I answer wrong, but no points will be deducted if I give up? 10 points pass. Does that mean I failed below 10 points? Then 20 points is good? 30 points is excellent? Dake stared at the water spirit and said in surprise. Which professor designed this puzzle? Did they purposely not announce the rules of the test beforehand? And these evaluations, what impact will it have on the future? Facing Dake's questions, the water spirit had no intention of answering. It stood on the surface of the water and placed its 2 small hands on its abdomen. Its face maintained a faint smile, and its eyes looked straight ahead with a clear conscience. Time passed by like flowing water. The air in the bathroom gradually became humid. Dark furrowed his brows slightly. He could faintly hear some fragmented sounds that made his hair stand on end. Pa! The water spirit's body suddenly exploded. The plug in the pool opened automatically. The water in the pool flowed into the pipe. The eerie sound that was like a ghost crying gradually became obvious. Pada! Dake took a step back. The water under his feet splashed because of this. However, water? He looked down and saw that the originally dry ground was silently submerged by water. The water rose quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was above the heel of his shoes. Pa! A gust of cold wind blew, and the door of the bathroom was suddenly closed. The dream demon who was guarding outside instantly passed through the door and poked her head in. However, Big Milk Kim was locked outside. Dake was alarmed. He immediately took out a obstruction spell card from his card bag and summoned an air cube under his feet. The water continued to spread upward. Suddenly, a splash sound came from the squatting cubicle in the bathroom. It was as if something had crawled out of the pool, and a large amount of water slid down its body. Then, the door of one of the cubicles was suddenly pushed open. A ghost, with disheveled hair, crawled out of the cubicle. "It's out." Dake suddenly focused his attention and sized it up. He didn't know if it was because he had chosen the female water spirit, but the ghost that crawled out of the cubicle was a female ghost with disheveled hair. The female ghost's hair was wet, and her entire face was covered by black hair. He couldn't even see her neck. Only a curved horn grew on the top of her head, and it was scarlet and eye-catching. However, from the bottom half of her body, it was a giant python with a thick waist. "It's a ghost snake." Information about ghost snake flashed through Dake's mind. Ghost snake was half ghost and half snake. It was an undying species of the ghost type, but it was a materialized ghost type. Ghost snakes had a large population. From young to mature, from 1 star to 9 stars, there was a huge difference between a strong ghost snake and a weak ghost snake. In the legends that stopped children from crying, ghost snakes fed on human babies. They would crawl out of the bathroom pipes in the middle of the night and eat disobedient children alive. The ghost snake in front of him was covered in moisture and black energy. The entire bathroom became eerie and terrifying because of its appearance. As an elite-level ghost of the 7th floor resource point, it was at least as strong as an 8-star magic spirit. However, if it was only an 8-star magic spirit, then, just as Dake was about to fight, the doors of 2 other cubicles were pushed open at the same time. 2 more ghost snakes slowly slithered out of the cubicles. There were a total of 3 ghost snakes. Each of them exuded a terrifying aura. At this moment, Dake finally understood the difference between 10 points and 30 points, and between passing and excellent. "I'm afraid that if I get 20 points and 30 points in the answering segment, I only need to face 2 and 1 ghost snake, respectively. However, it's not much different. I can only get 19 points at most." Dake quickly calmed down and entered battle mode. There are a total of 3 ghost snakes. If I rely solely on the Diru beast, or the demon beast, I'm afraid I won't even be able to defeat one of them. If I want to break through this resource point, I can't keep it no matter what. I spent nearly 10 minutes answering the questions just now. The demon beast still has less than 5 minutes to evolve. After it degenerates, I can use Bliss 3 to evolve it into a black Diru beast. Then it can fuse with the Diru beast to form a Basti beast. If I use Pride, I can summon a dragon egg and hatch a Green Eyes White Dragon. Although the Basti beast and the Green Eyes White Dragon are both 7-star, even if these 3 ghost snakes are strengthened elite-level monsters, I still have a chance to defeat them. But if it's a one-on-one battle, I'm still 1 less. Should I use Moon God equipment? Hiss. While Dake was thinking quickly, the 3 ghost snakes had already slithered out from the depths of the washroom. Although the washroom wasn't small, it was still terrifyingly crowded as a battlefield against 3 8-star monsters. In such an environment, not to mention whether the 3 ghost snakes could be used quickly, the Green Eyes White Dragon couldn't be used no matter what. Diru Beast, break through the door. Demon Beast, attack. Dake saw the situation clearly and immediately gave the order. At this moment, the obstruction spell cube had already covered the water surface. Dake felt a wave of wetness under his feet. He lifted his feet and quickly moved towards the door. The demon beast, who was flying in the air with its wings, roared and raised its 2 thick and long arms, using 10,000 claws of death. As the power of darkness surged, huge claws of death condensed in front of it and suddenly shot out. The next moment, the Diru beast held the single scabbard and threw it back. With a bang, the layer of ghost-type energy covering the door was completely eliminated. The big milk can outside the door finally successfully pushed open the washroom door. Then a large amount of water surged out from the door, causing the big milk can, who was caught off guard, to slide backward. Dake seized the opportunity and immediately jumped over, successfully escaping from the washroom by stepping on the water. The Diru beast was naturally even more agile and quickly jumped out. However, in the next second, the demon beast's scream came from the washroom. The 4-star magic guide sprite, Demon Beast, whose 3 stats were all at 2,000 points, had been insta-killed by the 3 ghost snakes before it could even use instant teleportation. After Dake escaped from the washroom, he quickly turned around, only to see one of the ghost snake's long black hair shoot out and easily break the 10,000 claws of death. Then, the black hair continued to extend. Although he didn't see it, the demon beast was most likely shot to death by this black hair. A long-range attack, and it doesn't seem to have a cooldown. Dake's heart sank quickly. After the demon beast was instantly killed, the Basti beast's summoning condition was missing. The fusion plan died prematurely before it could be used. However, there was only one pride that could raise some magic guide sprites to 7-star. Even the primordial dragon egg couldn't hatch a 7-star cyanized white dragon without using pride. He was undoubtedly in a predicament. Bad luck. 3 ghost snakes. In the lounge, Professor Li, who didn't miss any of Dake's performances, was happily watching his performance while eating peanuts and drinking wine. Professor Bacon, who was beside her, leaned over to take a look and couldn't help but switch his point of view to this side. This time, it wasn't just the professors from the math class who were watching. The other professors who weren't familiar with Dake also couldn't help but switch their point of view to this side. After all, it wasn't common for a second-year student to challenge an 8-star elite monster, and 3 of them at once. In the corner, the Magic Guide Language class professor, Holderbode, had been watching from the moment Dake entered the washroom. This was because the checkpoint of this resource point was designed by Professor Bode. Want to get my ghost snake magic crystal? Then struggle with all your might. When Professor Holderbode saw the 3 ghost snakes rush out of the washroom, he couldn't help but reveal a slightly sinister smile. The professors were watching very seriously. This time, they didn't make any small bets for fun. They probably all wanted to see what kind of trump card Dark Diamond, who had caused countless disturbances in the academy in the past year or so, had. What should I do? As his mana surged, Dake's mind became more and more active. It was as if he had entered the state of a duel. However, the current situation was even more serious than the one he faced in the Magic Guide duel. Time is limited. Choose between Fairy Beast and Cyanized White Dragon. Dake quickly retreated while pulling out pride. The Diru beast sensed pride's aura and immediately turned its head. Its tone was resolute and decisive. Dake suddenly made a decision. After that, he didn't hesitate and instantly raised pride in his hand up high. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon pride. There was less darkness and more light. Pride's radiance was as dazzling as the sun. The fairy hiding in the ceiling couldn't help but close its eyes. This caused the screens of the professor's little mirrors to turn black. Fortunately, the black screen only lasted for a moment. When the fairy reopened its eyes, they saw that Dake Dimming had actually closed his eyes. Then, the fingers holding the magic guide card lit up with a white light. Although the white light wasn't as dazzling as the golden light of pride, it left a deep impression on people. Mind power. Professor Li's eyes shone. Professor Holdelboyd's deep pupils subconsciously shrank. Many professors sucked in a breath of cold air. This isn't just mind power. He has formed a clear bond with his magic guide fairy. Any magister wouldn't neglect the research of mind magic. Only the majority of magisters couldn't get started, and those who had the chance to get started couldn't master it. They only divided the bond between the spirit force and the arcane elf into 2 levels. One was blurred, and the other was clear. The blurred bond could make the magic guide fairy respond to the magister's call. The clear bond could create miracles. Dake's mind power continuously shot into the Diru beast's body through the bond between them. The Diru beast held the hilt of the single sword scabbard tightly. Its cheeks were flushed, and the space between its eyebrows was shining. Bathed in pride's radiance, its body and limbs quickly elongated. It was like a young girl stretching her limbs. Its golden hair spread behind it, and 3 pairs of pure white angel wings drilled out of the radiance and suddenly spread out. Under the power of the bond and the power of the great sin, The 4-star Diru beast successfully evolved into a 7-star fairy beast. A holy and pure aura instantly erupted. Hiss! The 3 ghost snakes that swam out of the bathroom were attacked by this aura and immediately let out a hateful roar. The black gas on their bodies expanded due to this stimulation, crazily spreading in all directions. Little Dream Demon was so frightened that she hid behind Dake's back. But in the next moment, she quietly poked her head out and looked curiously with her eyes wide open. After successfully evolving, the fairy beast once again held the hilt of the single sword scabbard tightly. Its current star level was 7, and the single sword scabbard's attack was increased to 2,100. Its 3 stats were 3,500, 3,600, and 2,000. With the divine transformation's support, it jumped to 4,000/4, 100/2, 500. This was not inferior to any 8-star Magic Guide Fairy's 3 stats at all. And after fully displaying the power of the single sword scabbard, it could even increase its attack to 6,200. Leave the rest to me. The fairy beast held the holy sword horizontally in front of its chest, emitting a holy and awe-inspiring aura. Roar! X3 The 3 ghost snakes let out angry roars. The long black hair that covered their faces was blown away by the roars, revealing 3 faces that were not too different from each other. These 3 faces were incomparably skinny, revealing the markings of stork bones. On their originally ugly faces were scarlet snake eyes. The tongues that stretched out from their bloody mouths were forked in the middle, like the forked tongues of snakes. The 3 ghost snakes clearly had an innate hatred for the fairy beast. When the roar stopped, the 3 ghost snakes' auras instantly skyrocketed. Their wet black hair suddenly burst out and shot at the fairy beast. Heaven's purple light. However, in the face of this terrifying attack, the heavenly lady beast merely raised the holy sword in her hand. The holy purple light that erupted from its palm shot up along the sword hilt, and mixed with the holy power contained in the single sword scabbard, forming a highly condensed sword energy. This purple sword energy shot out under the fairy beast's control, condensing into a magnificent sword energy that was as large as a door. She held the sword with both hands, pursed her lips, and suddenly slashed down. The magnificent purple sword energy swept across and actually cut off the terrifying black hair of the 3 ghost snakes. More than half of the heaven's purple light's energy was depleted, but the most troublesome attack of the 3 ghost snakes was also sealed. The heavenly lady beast sneered coldly. Then it flapped its 6 angelic wings and flew toward the 3 ghost snakes. However, the 3 ghost snakes did not flinch because of their hair being cut off. They moved almost at the same time. The ghost snake in the middle suddenly opened its huge mouth and shot out a pitch-black beam of light out of thin air. The fairy beast slashed with its sword, and part of the heaven's purple light on the sword was depleted again. The other 2 ghost snakes raised their heads and hissed. The body of one of the ghost snakes swelled rapidly, and the snake scales on the lower half of the snake body grew as its body grew. The scales quickly spread to the whole body, covering its whole body with a layer of snake scale armor. Even its face was covered with snake scales. It had almost turned into a huge snake monster. The other ghost snake maintained a size similar to a human, but it had 2 snake-shaped weapons in its hands. The 2 snake blades seemed to be coated with poison, and they were black and smelly. 2 physical, 1 magic. The 3 ghost snakes attacked the fairy beast. The fairy beast was not weak in terms of aura. However, as a sorcerer, Dake had to have the ability to accurately judge the situation. He didn't put all the pressure on the shoulders of the fairy beast. After the cooldown of the usual summoning spell was over, he took out the Moon God's Soul Eye from his card bag. The Moon God's Soul Eye's armed form was only a 6-star Magic Guide Fairy without using the Moon God Stone to evolve. However, with the bonus of the passive skill, God's Personality Armament, it could increase its 3 sizes to 4,000 points, which was 8 stars. It would not be a problem for him to skillfully control the Moon God's armor and defeat one of the ghost snakes. If the fairy beast could last until the Moon God's soul killed one of the ghost snakes, it would be a one-on-one situation. Of course, this was the best prediction. However, under the current situation, there was nothing to hesitate about. Dake raised the moon god's soul eye and began to summon. Moo. The big milk can grabbed Dake's trousers, its eyes shining. Are you itching for a fight too? Dake could not help but touch the big milk can's head, revealing a slightly regretful expression. Then he turned the moon god's soul eye as target to the big milk can, enchanted. The gathered prayers shall become a new silver moon. Turn into a shining silver moon. Armed evolution moon god. The big milk can's eyes flashed with excitement. Ever since Dake did not need to roll to increase the upper limit of its damage output, it had not exercised for a long time. Although it was suitable for a nanny, every nanny had the heart of a warrior. The fairy beast's activity made it more and more unbearable. At this moment, it actually took the initiative to ask for a fight. Of course, as a professional nanny, it did not forget to make a bottle of milk before it evolved. Dake grabbed the bottle of milk, feeling amused. Then he saw the shadow of the moon god's soul appear behind the big milk can. Under the light of the silver moon, the big milk can gradually turned into a glowing object. After its body turned into a glowing object, it quickly elongated. Pieces of silver-white armor formed around it. The moment the silver-white armor completed its transformation, it stuck close to the big milk can's skin. When the light faded, the big milk can had evolved into a digital beast that looked nothing like the big milk can moon god. Compared to Dake's moon god form, the big milk can's moon god form was obviously more feminine. It could be said that it had completely changed from a neutral male to a female with obvious characteristics. However, other than the differences in details, the big milk can's moon god form was still as sharp as a blade. Its power would not be weakened at all. Prioritize the one hiding behind. Dake reached out his hand and pointed at the ghost snake, which was obviously a magic type. The moment the moon god's toes touched the ground, it turned into a silver-white lightning bolt. At the same time, the fairy beast was already engaged in close combat with the other two melee-type ghost snakes. Relying on the advantage of its weapon and brain, the fairy beast was not at a disadvantage at the beginning of the battle. Once the magic-type ghost snake was taken over by the moon god, the pressure on the fairy beast would be reduced by half. The other two ghost snakes might even be killed by the fairy beast first. The development of the battle was not too different from Dake's deduction. He gradually calmed his mind and was sure that he had won this battle. The magic-type ghost snake was targeted by the moon god, and it no longer had the time to shoot demonic light at the fairy beast. The moon god was completely immune to the ghost snake's transformation skills, and its defense was high enough to withstand the magic light. Although it relied on its strength in 3 sizes and had powerful close combat abilities, it was only a one-time use magic elf. Without any close combat sure-kill skills, it was impossible for it to be a match for the moon god. Although the big milk can didn't fight often, it did have good combat training. It had even learned swordsmanship and fist techniques. After the battle, the magic-type ghost snake was completely suppressed by the big milk can. It was only a matter of time before it was killed. Dake was completely relieved, but he still focused on the battle on both sides. However, while he was focused, the water that flowed out of the bathroom gradually spread to his feet. He was focused on dealing with the 3 ghost snakes, and didn't realize that the 3 ghost snakes weren't of the water element. They didn't have the ability to control the water element, so it was impossible for them to flood the bathroom. In the professor's lounge, only a few of the professors who were observing the battle through the mirror realized this. Even if the professors saw something fishy, they only showed more interest in it. This design is really like Professor Bode's style. Professor Bacon shook his head slightly. He grabbed a handful of wine-fermented peanuts from Lily's small plate and stuffed them into his mouth one by one. At that moment, the water that spread to the bottom of Dake's feet suddenly exploded. At that moment, he suddenly felt something strange, but it was too late. The violent water had already rolled up his body. The tentacles that spread out from the water even wrapped around his hands, making it impossible for him to put his hands into his card bag. The water was highly condensed, so there was no moisture. The water that flowed out of the bathroom quickly gathered at that moment, and condensed into a tall human-shaped water elemental next to Dake. Although these monsters wouldn't seriously injure the students, controlling the students' bodies and playing tricks like tying them up wasn't prohibited. Some monsters even had hypnotic skills that could make students fall into a deep sleep. If he encountered a more ferocious monster, the consequences would be more serious. The water elemental used to bind Dake gradually turned into a giant hand. Dake was lifted up high by the giant hand, and his body felt the pain of being squeezed. However, the more he was in this kind of situation, the more he needed to stay calm. He obviously inherited the Valkyrie's skills in this aspect. His face with vampire makeup didn't show the slightest bit of panic. Because of this, that kind of calm to the point of coldness made him produce a completely different range from his usual gentleness. Binding my hands was indeed the right choice, but unfortunately, his mouth was also blocked by a tentacle of the water elemental. However, silently casting summoning spells was a skill that every Shangmalian Academy magus had to master. And long-range magic output was also an ability that every magus duelist had to master. He just pointed his fingertip, and magic burst out and shot into the card bag. He closed his mouth tightly, and completed the silent casting in just 3 seconds. One of the magus cards in the card bag was instantly activated. Under the full attention of the professors, Dake's body suddenly glowed, and his body posture rapidly changed at this moment. Many of the professors couldn't help but show a look of astonishment. Even Professor Halderbode couldn't help but be moved. Dake Dimming, who was caught by the giant hand of the water elemental, actually shrank rapidly in the light. When the light dissipated, he had completely transformed into a ragdoll cat. Wow! Little Lily suddenly opened her eyes wide. She never knew that Dake had mastered the transformation spell. What a beautiful cat! Professor Bacon, who was beside her, also exclaimed. Some of the professors who were teaching the transformation spell class were even more surprised. After Dake Dimming transformed into a cat, he escaped from the giant hand of the water elemental at lightning speed. The dream demon, on the side, mustered up her courage and rushed forward. She released the gem of fear on the water elemental monster. 4-2. 5 of 127. It's the last 2 days of October. Don't keep the monthly votes. The next performance will be 15,000 votes per day. Chapter 638. Little Demon. Facing the water elemental's giant hand, Little Dream Demon closed her eyes, and the gem of fear on her chest released a magical light that shone like a gem. Even though it was only a 3-star magic fairy's ultimate skill, the huge amount of magical power accumulated in the gem of fear was released in one go, and it still caused a hindrance to the water elemental. Dake, who had transformed into a cat, took the opportunity to escape. When he used the transformation spell, this time, he only injected a little magical power and limited the duration of the transformation spell to 1 minute. However, this 1 minute wasn't that easy to get through. That water elemental was an 8-star elite monster, and Dream Demon was only able to block it for a moment before it was hit by the elemental water cannon that it shot out. Then, it suddenly raised its arm, and the giant hand actually extended towards the ceiling and became bigger, as if it was going to slap Dake, who had transformed into a cat, into a small biscuit in the next second. In the nick of time, the water elemental's back shone with a holy light. After the fairy beast used the scabbard to block the ghost snake that was holding the snake blade, it flapped its wings and retreated, pulling away from the other ghost snake. Website: https://m.vipcanchu. VIP. As it retreated, the 2 wings on its left wrist gathered into a holy bow amidst the light. It pulled the bowstring with its right hand, and a thunderbolt arrow was condensed at its fingertips, shooting out like a thunderbolt. Heavenly punishment. As soon as the clear voice was heard, the holy arrow, wrapped in the power of thunder, hit the water elemental from behind. The water elemental's body was penetrated by the arrow, and its movements suddenly became sluggish. The electric current that spread from the wound instantly paralyzed it. It couldn't move. The fairy beast's arrow undoubtedly bought Dake the most crucial time. After he successfully pulled away, he finally managed to drag the transformation spell's duration until it was over. He suddenly stood up from his ragdoll form and returned to his human form. The moment he returned to his human form, Dake immediately took out 2 magic cards from his card pack. The magician's secretary quickly flew over and spread out beside him. The magician and the magic fairy chanted at the same time. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon the first dragon egg. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Greed 3. White and blue light burst out from the surface of the two magic cards. A huge summoning circle appeared in front of Dake, and a snow-white dragon egg slowly floated out of it. The violet light that symbolized greed passed through the dragon egg and shone on the single scabbard that had returned to the fairy beast's hand. The heavenly lady beast was slightly stunned and immediately responded, "Single scabbard, transform into an elf." The single scabbard vibrated slightly, and the eye and the sword puppet suddenly opened. The ribbon tied to the sword hilt expanded into the shape of an arm. When it transformed into its elf form, it automatically dived into the radiance of Greed 3 and crazily demanded the power of greed. The heavenly lady beast tried its best to dodge the attacks of the two phantom snakes, until the single scabbard split into two in the radiance and evolved into a double scabbard, with two swords and an oval shield. Then, it suddenly waved its hand and grabbed one of the swords. It flapped its wings and pounced forward again. As for the remaining sword, it used its ribbon tentacles to pick up the shield and shot it in front of Dake like a gust of wind. Dake grabbed the sword hilt, took off the shield, and quickly threw it out. Gotcha! The dragon egg's eggshell instantly shattered. The green-eyed dragon whelp flew out from the shattered eggshell and roared as it grabbed the holy sword that was coming from behind. Although it could not activate the holy sword's divine power, after equipping the holy sword, it could still gain a pure attack buff. Green-eyed dragon whelp was a 6-star light-type dragon whelp, and its attack was as high as 3,000 points. With the double scabbard 1's buff, it could increase its attack by 1,800 points. This meant that the power of its sword could reach as high as 5,800 points of attack. Although it could not be compared to the fairy beast with the single scabbard, it was still very terrifying. However, its weakness was that its magic power and defense were only 2,500 points, and due to its body structure, it could not use its sword skills. When it used its sword skills, it was lower than its fists and claws. However, when facing an 8-star elite-level monster, even if its sword skills were not good enough, it had to bite the bullet. Roar! Oh! Green-eyed dragon whelp raised its sword and roared as it charged forward. Dake carefully observed its surroundings. This time, after confirming that there were no abnormalities, it quickly calmed down. It was a huge mistake not to discover the existence of the water elemental in advance. However, the conclusion of the mistake was something that happened after the battle. Green-eyed dragon whelp, let your light shine on the earth. Light of Spirit Hall. Green-eyed dragon whelp gathered its energy as it charged towards the water elemental. The holy white light gathered above its head and condensed into a blazing ball of light that was like the sun. It roared as the ball of light rushed into the sky. The holy aura instantly filled the air, and snow-white feathers fell from the sky. When the ball of light exploded, the surrounding environment quickly changed. The entire open space in front of the washroom was bathed in the warm white light of the Light of Spirit Hall. Although the Light of Spirit Hall did not increase the attributes of the light elemental magic guide spirits, allowing a fish to fight in the water and on land would obviously display a completely different battle strength. Green-eyed dragon whelp and fairy beast were like fish in water. However, the three ghost snakes and moon god felt uncomfortable. Although ghost snakes were of the ghost element, they obviously had a portion of the dark element. Moon god was purely of the dark element, which countered the light element. However, fairy beast was the main force at this moment. The Light of Spirit Hall's existence could allow fairy beast to be reborn in the form of a spirit even if it fell. There was no room for failure in this battle. Green-eyed dragon whelp, who lacked an effective killing move, was at a disadvantage in the battle against water elemental. However, although it was in a sorry state, it was barely able to hold on with the help of double sword sheath 1. Fairy beast was fighting 1 against 2, but it had the upper hand. However, it was unable to take down its opponent in a short period of time. The breakthrough point was Moon God. Again, Big Milk Can, who had evolved into Moon God, indicated that it also needed a sword. Unfortunately, its owner could no longer satisfy it. Big milk can, and this quickly. Not only could it not satisfy it, but it also gave it a mission that was almost impossible. There was no other way. Moon God suddenly jumped into the air and dodged another demonic light from Ghost Snake. Then it used its strongest killing move. Lunar Eclipse, under the screech of the magic elemental, Ghost Snake. It raised its right hand, and the bright moonlight was drawn in from outside the castle and gathered above it. A sea of moonlight lit up the sky. Moon God concentrated on gathering energy until the bright moonlight illuminated every corner of the surroundings. Then it suddenly yelled and slashed its hand down. Almost at the same time, ripples appeared one after another from the sea of moonlight, and the light beam condensed by the moonlight burst out and landed on the head of the magic elemental, Ghost Snake. Boom! The magic elemental Ghost Snake's head was hit by the lunar eclipse, light beam in the moonlight, and its entire head seemed to explode. The black hair that was cut off scattered and evaporated, and it was almost bald. However, it relied on its strengthened defense to forcefully withstand the first beam of moonlight. Then, it suddenly raised its head and screeched, and the ghostly energy gathered above its head to form a pitch-black barrier. The second and third beams of moonlight fell one after another after that moment, continuously bombarding the pitch-black barrier. The magic elemental Ghost Snake's ugly face revealed a look of madness, and it madly injected its demonic power into the barrier. The fourth, fifth, and sixth beams of moonlight shot down. The barrier finally couldn't hold on, and completely shattered. Its entire body was completely exposed under the remaining moonlight. Moon God stood in the air, emitting moonlight like a god. It raised its eyebrows and blasted down the remaining 6 beams of moonlight. That magic elemental, Ghost Snake, finally turned into ashes under the terrifying lunar eclipse. The first one, Dake said softly. After completely killing the Ghost Snake, Moon God only took a moment to catch its breath before charging towards the petite Ghost Snake that was holding the snake blade. That gigantic Ghost Snake was too difficult for it to deal with. Fairy Beast also quickly cooperated and attacked the remaining gigantic Ghost Snake with all its might. In a one-on-one situation, its advantage was even more obvious. The double scabbard in its hand slashed open the Ghost Snake's snake scales, cut off its claws, and completely cut off the curved horn on its head. Bathed in the white light of the light of spiritual hall, Fairy Beast was like a fish in water, and it killed the Ghost Snake on the spot. Oh, the cyanide baby dragon that was struggling to hold on had its defenses broken by the water elemental's all-pervasive attacks. It couldn't withstand the full attack of an 8-star monster at all. In the blink of an eye, it was in danger and transformed into a dragon egg. At the last moment, that water elemental once again faced Dake. However, Dake didn't panic at all. Moon Goddess had already forced away the Ghost Snake that was holding the snake blade. It stepped on the void and flew over. The Fairy Beast that killed the gigantic Ghost Snake took over the Ghost Snake that was left behind. A moment later, Moon Goddess had already grabbed the double scabbard that the cyanide baby dragon had let go of. It was overjoyed and pounced on the water elemental without fear. Thank you for your hard work. Dake didn't hatch the primordial dragon egg again. Instead, he took the dragon egg form into consideration for the upcoming battle and stored it back into the magic card. This battle had developed to this point, and if there were no accidents, it wouldn't be dangerous anymore. Although it was difficult for Moon Goddess to hurt the water elemental that was almost immune to physical attacks, as long as the Fairy Beast was free, it could activate the Holy Sword's power and work with Moon Goddess to kill the water elemental. Relying on the Milkkin's milk, the Fairy Beast recovered to its peak state during the battle and quickly killed the last Ghost Snake. Although there were upperclassmen who walked by and watched, they didn't interfere. The professors who were watching in the lounge relaxed one after another. Professor Holdelboyd showed an even more sinister smile, but it might just be his face. The water elemental didn't struggle too much under the combined efforts of the Fairy Beast and Moon Goddess. When the Hall of Light reached its end point, the pure angel's feathers scattered in all directions. The water elemental's gigantic body was pierced by a sword and instantly exploded. Clear water sprinkled down like rain, and the ground was damp again. However, the most difficult battle in the masquerade ball had finally come to an end. Dake took a deep breath and summoned Moon Goddess and Fairy Beast to his side. Now it's time to reap the rewards. Breaking through the 7th floor's resource point gave him a considerable amount of credits. However, the most important thing was the materials left behind in this resource point. Dake held the magician's secretary in his hand and led the magician managers into the washroom again. At this time, there were no traces of water on the washroom's floor, and the gloomy atmosphere had completely disappeared. The moonlight from the window at the end illuminated the room, and everything seemed unusually peaceful. Dake found a gift box floating in the air on the sink. "There's only one," he said with slight disappointment. However, when he thought that if he answered all the questions correctly, he might only summon one ghost, and he was relieved. The professors wouldn't put 3 or even 4 portions of resources in a resource point. "Open it and take a look," the fairy beast said with her arms crossed. Dark nodded, picked up the gift box and opened it. There was indeed only one ghost snake's magical crystal in the gift box. However, under the crystal, there was a elemental bead with the water attribute. The so-called elemental bead was the product of highly condensed elements of various types, and it was suitable for refining various types of magic cards. The quality of the elemental bead was determined by its purity. Dake didn't know much about the quality of the elemental bead, but he could feel that the elemental bead in his hand was very pure, and its quality was definitely not low. If I use the foxgrass to cultivate the fruit of jealousy, I might be able to refine a water ibu, like the fairy ibu. Dake pondered for a while and looked at the ghost snake's magical crystal. He had never seen the ghost snake's magical crystal before, but this black crystal that contained the energy of the ghost element had patterns on its surface that were extremely similar to the ghost snake's scales. He guessed that it was similar to the ghost snake. For items like this, if I mastered the ghost snake's directional refining method, I should be able to refine a ghost snake, right? Since this ghost snake, an elite level ghost, appeared at the masquerade ball, the refining method of the ghost snake must have been obtained from one of the professors. But this ghost snake. Thinking of the ghost snake's withered, ugly, and terrifying face, Dake shuddered slightly. The magic fairy that he refined wasn't like the other Magister's magic fairies, which mostly stayed in magic cards. Just thinking about having such a terrifying ghost snake by his side in the future gave him goosebumps. But if I don't use it to refine the ghost snake, how can I use this crystal? Dake couldn't help but ponder. The ghost snake's magical crystal and the water elemental bead were definitely extremely high-grade materials. His goal of taking the risk to enter the 7th floor could be said to have been achieved, and he should have been very surprised. Surprise, surprise. Dake forced himself to open his mouth and smile as much as he could. Then he put away these 2 items and prepared to return to the lower floor before the fairy beast and celestial moon arrived. There was only one resource point left on the 7th floor, and he didn't want to waste any more time exploring it. Next, he still needed to make up for the 9 resource points as soon as possible, so that he could obtain the credits reward that he needed to break through the 20 resource points. Now that the credits were being consumed faster and faster, he wouldn't give up any opportunity to obtain a large number of credits. If I'm lucky, it'll be great if I can encounter a group of 7-star ghosts as soon as possible. Don't you think so? Fairy Beast. Heh. The fairy beast snorted coldly and turned her head to the side. The celestial moon hugged Dake's body from behind, indicating that it would be faster this way. Then let's go. Dake didn't refuse. When the fairy beast and celestial moon's evolution time ended, Dake finally returned to the 6th floor. Unfortunately, he didn't encounter a group of ghosts during this period, only 2 or 3 of them who didn't have eyes. After returning to the 6th floor, he stored the Diru Beast and Big Milkkin into the magic cards, then chose Meow Meow, Wrestling Hawkman, and Single Scabbard, that had transformed into a fairy. With these 3 magic fairies, of course, it was impossible to stay on the 6th floor for long. Therefore, these 3 magic fairies were mainly responsible for scouting the way and responding at critical moments. Once they couldn't hide, they would definitely encounter ghosts. They would use the candy tactic, sprinkle a handful of candy, and quickly escape. In short, they would do it as quickly as possible. Fortunately, the ghosts on the 6th floor had almost been cleared. Those senior students who weren't able to gain a foothold on the 7th floor had almost cleared the 6th floor of the castle. Dake didn't encounter too much danger. He successfully went from the 6th floor to the 5th floor. This was the first time he set foot on the 5th floor tonight. The ghosts on the 5th floor of the castle were mainly 5-star, but in fact, there were also some 4-star ones. The outstanding 3rd years weren't satisfied with the strength of the ghosts on the 4th floor, so they would challenge the 5th floor. The 4th years who weren't very good at duels would also choose the 5th floor as their hunting spot. This could be said to be the center of the intersection between the 3rd and 4th years. Of course, occasionally, there would be students from higher years who would go down to the 5th floor for efficiency. Everyone's considerations were different, and the resulting actions would also be different. Dake didn't stop on the 5th floor. This time, he went straight down to the 4th floor. With only 3-star and 4-star magic fairies by his side, the 4th floor was the safest and fastest. His goal wasn't the ghosts that had almost been cleared, but the resource points. The lower the floor, the lower the efficiency of conquering the resource points. The students who chose the 4th floor as their hunting ground should be the best of the 2nd or even 1st years, as well as ordinary 3rd years. The number of outstanding people in the 1st and 2nd years was relatively small, and the speed at which ordinary 3rd years conquered resource points was actually relatively slow. This made the probability of unconquered resource points relatively high. Of course, in theory, the number of resource points left on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st floors would also be higher. Especially on the 1st floor, there would definitely be a lot left. On the other hand, because the 8th and 9th floors were too difficult, there should be a lot of resource points left. But that had nothing to do with Dake. He was determined to not waver in his goal, and quickly searched the 4th floor according to the resource map. If it was already past the scheduled 8:30 p.m., he had to hurry. When it was 9 o'clock sharp, Dark successfully found 2 more resource points that had yet to be broken through and quickly broke through them. At 9:30 p.m., Dake found 3 more unconquered resource points. Similarly, he didn't waste too much time. But after that, the number of unconquered resource points that could be found decreased. It seemed that the other students had also started to focus on conquering resource points quickly. Dake only managed to snatch another resource point at 10 p.m. At this point, he had conquered a total of 17 resource points. There are still 3 more to go. After careful consideration, Dake decisively went from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor, arriving at the floor that the 2nd-year students were supposed to occupy. On the 1st floor, he also saw many 1st-year students. After that, he spent about 30 minutes and finally conquered the last 20 resource points. I finally succeeded. Looking at the large number of credits he had obtained after conquering 20 resource points, Dake couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Starting from 6 p.m. sharp, high-intensity running and battling all the way until 10:30 p.m., he had spent a total of 4 hours and 30 minutes. He had finally completed all the tasks for this year's masquerade ball. And now it was finally time for the party. Cyanide Dragon Whelp Lion Beast Scabbard Fairy Ibu Milk Kandiru Beast. Are they all ready? After confirming that all the Magic Elven cards had been replenished, and that all the Magic Elven cards weren't on cooldown, Dake opened his mouth and revealed his vampire fangs. There's still an hour and 20 minutes before the masquerade ball ends. The upperclassmen on the upper floors should have already started partying, right? I wonder if I can make it in time if I join now. Dake went up, summoning all the way. Lion Beast, Diru Beast, Scabbard, Little Devil Beast, as well as the Magician's secretary, that hadn't been recalled all followed him up. When he entered the 5th floor, Dake saw the werewolf and vampire, who were constantly looking for people to duel, as well as the ghost and witch who were waiting at the side. When he returned to the 6th floor, Dake saw Deanna and Luosi who were scattering sugar everywhere. He took a step back so that Deanna and Luosi wouldn't notice him. Then, he immediately turned to the other side and quickly left. The 6th floor was the most suitable floor for him. Most of the ghosts that wandered on the 6th floor were within his hunting range. And the 3rd, 4th, and 5th years that stayed on the 6th floor were also within his hunting range. Choosing the most suitable targets, having a 3-second duel, and enjoying the happiness that came with the identity of a vampire was his goal. The 3rd-year seniors should be the most suitable targets for warming up. Although most of them didn't perform well last year, the 3rd-year students who could stand firm on the 6th floor definitely can't be judged with common sense. I wonder if Senior Mary Bond is on the 6th floor? I was too focused on finding resource points tonight. So many of my acquaintances didn't discover her. Of course, if I can find the 4th-year senior Michael Owen, it would be pretty good too. Dake was like a real vampire who had smelled the scent of blood, and he greedily looked for targets to suck. He was pretty lucky. In just 2 minutes, he followed the sounds and found the prey that had gathered together. Are all the prey nowadays so unvigilant? Dake sighed. In a relatively spacious corridor, a senior and a senior were dueling. The senior was wearing a penguin suit that only revealed his head. He looked very bloated, but his movements were surprisingly agile. He kept dodging the long-range attacks that the opponent's magic elf launched. The senior was wearing a suit and a navy cap, looking valiant and formidable. To be honest, Dake didn't recognize any of them. But that didn't stop him from recognizing those onlookers. It was very likely that the people around him were hiding, ghosts, but there were a total of 6 of them watching. Although these 6 people were hiding behind a pillar, they didn't have any other defensive measures. Now that the 6th floor was basically cleared of ghosts, they didn't have to worry about being attacked by ghosts that suddenly appeared. Wait, it can't be that all 6 of them are ghosts, right? Maybe there's also an immortal bird that's immune to all abilities. With this thought in mind, Dake walked over without hiding anything. In order to successfully activate Steel, a ghost had to stay within 10 meters and follow the other party for more than 3 minutes without being discovered. There were 2 meanings of without being discovered. One was to not be seen. The other was to not be pointed out. Dake wasn't sure at first, but after experiencing it, he understood that seeing but not being pointed out was still considered not being discovered. The school card wasn't that intelligent. One had to do the act of discovering the other party in order to make a judgment. Therefore, inadvertently hearing the other party's footsteps or shadow, but not reacting was not considered discovery. Dake's footsteps were obviously noticed. The 6 onlookers immediately turned to look at him. Then, 2 of them immediately raised their fingers in front of their lips and shushed him. Dake winked at one of the 6 people and slowly took out his school card. He wasn't worried that there would be a witch among the 6 people. Firstly, if he used some skills, the other party wouldn't be able to determine whether he was a werewolf or a vampire. Secondly, even if 5% of his credits were taken away, he could still earn it back from the prey. 10% against 5%. As long as the prey's credits were more than half of his, he would make a profit. And a senior who could stand firmly on the 6th floor shouldn't have less than half of his credits, right? Therefore, as long as he won the duel, it would be fine. Senior Zach Wilson, this is the first time I've officially greeted you. I wonder if you have time to spar with me? 5th year Noble House Zach Wilson. He was a member of the Noble History Research Society and a member of the Duel Club. At the same time, he was also the commentator for the rookie competition. It could be said that he was a familiar stranger. In fact, Dake didn't give Zach Wilson any room to refuse. Zach Wilson wore a black suit and a blood-red cloak. His collar was pulled up high and he had fangs in his mouth. Although he didn't have wings, it was obvious that he was dressed as a vampire. When he saw Dake Dimming, who was also dressed as a vampire, raise his school card, his expression instantly changed. As a commentator who was gradually becoming a professional, he had a good understanding of Dake Diming's strength. Because of this, he was very clear that Dake's set of cards could be limited in a magic duel. In this kind of instant duel, it was very terrifying. Although he was already a 5th-year student, his strength was actually quite average. In this academy, time and grade were no longer the standard to judge a student's strength. The difference in strength between a top student and an ordinary student was very likely to cross several grades. Among them, Panduola Doragon and Winnie Scardy, as well as the second-year Dake Dimming in front of him, were very prominent representatives. But after a flash of light on Dake's school card, he felt the vibration of his own school card. Vampirism ability activate. The two school cards connected on the spot. Two blood-red lines of magic emerged from Dake's feet and quickly spread along the arc, quickly reaching the bottom of Zach Wilson's feet. Thus, on the ground between the two, a dual field less than 3 meters long was built. In the center of the field, a 300-second countdown to the duel instantly popped up. The school cards of the two duelists were also connected to the barrier outside the castle at the same time, creating a spherical transparent barrier outside their bodies. The battle was unavoidable. I don't think I have any grudges with him on the surface, right? Zach Wilson couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course, he couldn't have guessed the most direct reason why he was chosen as the target of vampirism. It was only because he looked familiar. Moreover, in this masquerade ball, the hunting of the vampire and the werewolf didn't need a reason. It was just like how, as a ghost, he was also stealing other people's credits. Boom. When the duel started, the other 5 people who were squeezed together with Zach Wilson immediately scattered with their magic fairy. The two duelists who were dueling on the other side instantly discovered everyone here and made a clear discovery action. F*CK. The ghost among the 5 immediately cursed in his heart. Then someone immediately encouraged, Zach Wilson, the opponent is only a second-year student. You can't possibly be unable to beat him, right? How can that be? Zach Wilson laughed dryly and immediately hid behind the magic fairy beside him. Due to the limited recovery rate of magic power, the effects of the magic rejuvenation potion would continue to decline after consuming too much in a short period of time. Thus, the majority of students only placed a magic fairy beside them in order to conserve magic power. Zach Wilson's magic fairy was a 6-star Shrieking Gorilla. The Shrieking Gorilla was a very unique magic fairy. Although it was strong, muscular, and its upper body was as broad as a mountain, it wore a tight black vest, black thick-rimmed sunglasses, Hawaiian shorts, and a skirt made of banana peel. This outfit wasn't Zach Wilson's special hobby, but its natural equipment. It was called the Shrieking Set, among the killing moves, and it was a passive killing move. This Shrieking Set could absorb a special power called Shrieking Energy. As long as someone screamed for it around the Shrieking Gorilla, it could absorb the Shrieking Energy. The louder and more screams, the more Shrieking Energy it absorbed. This Shrieking Energy would be used to strengthen the Shrieking Set. It made the Shrieking Set cooler and more handsome. Roar. The Shrieking Gorilla raised its hands, showed its muscles and patted its chest fiercely, showing its white and neat teeth to Dake. Zach Wilson hid behind the Shrieking Gorilla and immediately took out a magic card to summon. He didn't dare to underestimate Dake at all. The first move was the strongest trump card that he had accidentally refined. Beside Dake, the lion beast saw that the Diru beast had no intention of stepping forward, so it took a step forward and punched out. Beast King Fist. The lion-shaped shock wave blasted into the Shrieking Gorilla's chest from the front. But the Shrieking Gorilla suddenly stared, pressed its chest and roared. The roar from its mouth turned into substance, and it completely shattered the Beast King Fist of the lion beast. The two sturdy magic guide fairies fiercely punched each other in the next moment. Due to the slight disadvantage in strength, the lion beast was blasted back half a step by the punch. But it immediately pulled out the Lion King pill from its waist. Its eyes were bloodshot, and it slashed at lightning speed. The Shrieking Gorilla raised its hand to block, but the Lion King pill cut a very deep wound. But it wasn't afraid at all. It turned around and kicked the lion beast. The lion beast stabilized its lower body and welcomed the kick. The Lion King pill in its hand quickly sank and stabbed into the Shrieking Gorilla's chest. With this stab, the lion beast approached, and the ancestral demon sword stabbed into the Shrieking Gorilla's body. Roar. The Shrieking Gorilla finally screamed. In this extremely close confrontation, the lion beast with a lower star level actually had the upper hand. But this confrontation couldn't determine the outcome. Zach Wilson hid behind and had successfully completed the usual summoning in this gap. His eyes flashed. After injecting as much magic power as possible, he immediately aimed the magic card at Dake. After a moment, above Dake's head, countless blades appeared in an instant. Magic spell card. Blade Array Hell. The densely packed blades flickered with snow-white brilliance. Zach Wilson suddenly shouted, "The outcome is decided!" Blade Array Hell was a large-scale attack, and there were also short blades hidden in the big blade. With dark small magic elves that didn't have any AoE killing skills, it was impossible for them to completely block the attack of this curse card. The blades falling from the sky would completely tear him apart. Of course, it was impossible. It would only cause a lot of damage to the barrier. Even if the damage of one blade was not enough, so many blades could always accumulate to 2,000 points of damage. In the blink of an eye, countless blades rained down from the sky. Dake Demon dodged. Yes, he dodged. Without relying on any magic elves, he flashed out of the range of Blade Array Hell. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Zach Wilson's curse words burst out of his mouth. When Dake flashed out of the range of Blade Array Hell, the Diru beast also dodged easily. Of course, the single scabbard in its hand also dodged easily. Only the flying speed of the little demon beast was not enough to dodge. But the little demon beast had already disappeared. Zach Wilson immediately felt the barrier behind him shake violently, and his energy counter instantly jumped to the full value of 2,000 points. GGG. The demon beast that appeared once again spread its wings and sneered behind him. Battle ended. In less than a round, this word appeared in the center of the duel arena. Zach Wilson clearly knew that Dake had a magic elf that could instant transmission, but because of his lack of combat experience, he was instantly killed. However, wasn't it normal for a game commentator to not know how to play games like a game coach not knowing how to play games? Zach Wilson's defeat was only a matter of time. Thank you for letting me win. Dake waved the branch card in his hand and said with a smile. Just now he received a gift from Senior Zach Wilson. Forget it. Zach Wilson sighed and took out his branch card, wanting to confirm his loss. However, from the crowd that had just dispersed, a person suddenly walked over quickly and whispered into his ear. Zach Wilson glanced at him and shook his head slightly. The student wearing a tight leather jacket and a funny mask froze on the spot for a moment. Then, he suddenly raised his head and walked toward Dake. At the same time, he raised the branch card that he had already drawn and pointed it at Dake. Dake looked up and saw the word, witch written on the card. Hello, I'm a witch. The witch wearing a funny mask walked in front of Dake. Dake had expected this and said calmly, hello, witch. But the witch obviously didn't like being called a witch, and his tone became a bit more nasty. Don't think about dueling with me. Everyone's ability will enter a 3-minute cooldown after using it. In these 3 minutes, I'll run to a place where you won't be able to find me. Dake, the witch continued. You're a werewolf or a vampire. If I use my ability now, there's a 50% chance that my guess will be correct. Dake smiled and said, Senior Zach Wilson didn't tell you my identity? The witch said angrily he didn't. You should have told me. That way, I can help him take revenge. Dake couldn't help but be curious. Since he didn't tell you, aren't you afraid that you'll guess wrong? If the witch's divination guesses wrong, won't you have to pay 10% of your credits instead? I advise you to be kind. The witch shook his head and said calmly, Of course, I have my considerations. You're vampire. Disguise has completely exposed your identity. Be prepared for me to take 5% of your credits. Dake couldn't help but blink. The witch looked at his expression and became more certain. I'll use my ability. Divination. Your identity is a werewolf. Wearing the vampire costume is to hide your werewolf identity. You're really too smart for your own good. Both sides' branch cards immediately vibrated after the divination ended. The witch couldn't wait to take the branch card and check it. Then her expression changed. Dake laughed and raised his hand across his abdomen. He bowed slightly and said, Thank you for your hospitality. I'm very grateful. He couldn't have imagined that there would be such an unexpected gain after winning the duel. And the credits he gained were even more than the credits he got from Vampiric. When fortune came, it was really unstoppable. Although I really want to know who Senior is, I don't think Senior is willing to reveal his identity at this time. So, I won't ask anymore. Dake waited until the demonic beast flew back to his side. He waved at the witch, and said in a friendly manner, "Then goodbye, Senior. Good luck." After he finished speaking, he glanced at the rest of the people, and turned to leave. Of course, he couldn't just catch a fleece. There were more fat sheep waiting for him on the 6th floor of the castle. Damn it. After Dake left, the witch suddenly roared angrily, and then suddenly turned to Zach Wilson. Of course, he knew that there was more than one ghost hidden in this group of people. If he wanted to recover his losses, he could only start from them. However, the 5 of them, including Zach Wilson, suddenly dispersed. The witch, whose ability was also in a 3-minute cooldown, was suddenly flustered and exasperated. The vampire Dake Dimming, who was in a good mood, found another group of targets after 3 minutes. In fact, on the 6th floor of the castle, it was much easier to find students than ghosts. After most of the students couldn't find any ghosts or resource points to hunt, they focused on the identity game. Many people were addicted to it after they gained something and couldn't stop. On the way to find targets, Dake even met 2 vampires, or werewolves, but they were all disappointed because he was a vampire. But now he stood in front of 2 fourth-year seniors and challenged one of them to a duel. It's decided to be you. The 2 fourth-year seniors were wearing school uniforms, but their faces were covered with masks, so it was possible to identify their year in school. Of course, there was also the possibility of deliberately pretending to be students from other schools, or using their own old school uniforms. But being killed by a failed hunt was also part of the experience. Uncertainties, on the contrary, made people excited. Dake chose the senior who was wearing the seal mask. As for the other senior, because she was wearing the sea eel mask, he didn't make a move. But after he showed his school card to the seal senior, she took off her mask and said helplessly, "Happy Halloween, Dake Dimming." "Happy Halloween, Senior Betty." Dake couldn't help but smile awkwardly. He deliberately chose the seal mask because Betty Murray's mask in the Marine Order was the sea eel mask. He didn't expect these 2 seniors to play a game of swapping masks. "Do you want to duel with me?" Senior Betty looked at the duel field that was being built and asked casually. "Sorry, Senior, there's no turning back," Dake said. Senior Betty tidied her bangs that were messed up because of the mask and said, "But I'm not interested in a duel. How about this? You let your demon beast attack me once, and I'll take it as my loss." Dake frowned slightly and said, "That's not appropriate." Senior Betty couldn't help but spread her hands and said as if it was natural, "But I'm not your opponent. You know that I'm not good at duels." Dake was silent for a moment and said, "Then let's wait for 5 minutes and default to a draw." "Isn't that a waste of your time?" Senior Betty said with a smile. "How about this? I have another suggestion." Dake. "What suggestion?" Senior Betty said with a smile. "I'm a witch." Dake said, "Is that so? Most of the people with divination talent are witches." Senior Betty nodded and said, "More or less. In short, I can get 5% of your credits by guessing your identity. Although I'm a 5th year, the credits I'll get tonight won't be as much as yours. You take 10% of the credits from me, and I'll take 5% of the credits from you. Let's make a bet and see who benefits more. How about it?" Dake pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Okay. This does have a different kind of excitement, doesn't it?" Therefore, Senior Betty asked her companions to move away, and stood there to take the attack of the demon beast. The demon beast didn't have any desire to attack, and it took 2 consecutive punches to increase its energy to 2,000 points. Dark won the duel without shedding a drop of blood and obtained 10% of the credits from Senior Sister Betty's lifesteal. But when he wanted to confirm the number of credits, Senior Betty gently pressed down on his school card. Betty said gently, "Wait, let's do it together later. That's more fun, isn't it?" Indeed. Dake stopped. If he could directly calculate the winner after confirming the number of credits, it would lose the fun. Betty raised her index finger and waved it at him to attract his attention. Then I'll activate my ability. Divination. Your identity is... Dake was puzzled. Aren't you going to wait for me to tell you? Betty smiled and said, You're a vampire, right? You don't have any werewolves among your magic spirits. Dake smiled. Correct. As a result, Betty successfully took 5% of his credits from his school card. Both of them picked up their respective school cards, checked their credits, and calculated the increase and decrease. Based on a rough estimation, as long as Betty obtained more than half of Dark's credits tonight, Dark would be able to win this bet. On the other hand, Betty would gain an advantage. Although Betty was a top student in the 5th grade, her excellence was mainly in theory. She might not be able to obtain more than half of Dake's credits. After a quick calculation, both sides smiled at each other and reported a string of numbers. But in fact, there was no need to report it. From the increase and decrease of credits, it could be seen who won and who lost. Looks like I've won. Betty revealed a slightly smug smile. She had a little more credits than before the duel. Dake put away his school card and said regretfully, It's all my fault for working too hard. Betty chuckled at his sudden words. She stretched out her hand and said, Since I've won, then as the victor, I invite you to dance tonight. You won't refuse, right? Although Dake was a little surprised, he still shook her hand and said, Of course not. Senior, Betty said happily. Then goodbye for now. I won't waste your time. Goodbye, Senior. Dake sighed in his heart. He regretted not wearing a mask when he went out. But he quickly perked up and continued to work hard. 3 minutes later, he caught another senior who was about a 4th grade and challenged him to a duel on the spot. Relying on the demon beast that had yet to degenerate from its evolved state, Dake successfully attracted his attention and used the demon beast's instant teleportation to win this duel. That 4th grade senior was obviously as hardworking as he was, and had a lot of credits sucked away by him. Dake immediately swept away the haze and continued to hunt. He moved quickly on the 6th floor, firing one shot after another. Every time the cooldown ended, he would use lifesteal, once, almost without pause. There weren't many opportunities like this where he could initiate a duel without a reason. Of course he cherished it. But he also chose his opponent well. Basically, he evaluated the opponent's specific strength based on the opponent's magic guide sprite before initiating the duel. From 10:30 to 11:30, it was a whole hour. Dake paid the price of greed +1. During this time, Ghost and Witch accidentally guessed his identity and almost lost the duel. There were expenses and income. Finally, after an hour, he stopped. The increase in credits was secondary. Enjoying the fun of the duel was the most important. After an hour of continuous high-intensity duels, Dake was finally satisfied. He found the wall clock to confirm the time, and prepared to leave the 6th floor of the castle where the atmosphere was feverish. 11:30, half an hour before the end of the masquerade party, Dake decided to continue going up. When he entered the 7th floor again, Dake saw that the seniors were all running in the same direction. He immediately realized that someone had found the boss of the 7th floor of the castle. Dake still remembered the 8-star boss vampire count that he encountered last year. He wanted to follow behind the seniors to check it out. However, after running 2 steps, he slowed down his pace. The boss of the 7th floor should be a 7-star leader tier monster, right? Although this 7-star leader tier monster is very likely to be stronger than an 8-star elite tier monster, it shouldn't be able to stop the seniors. If that's the case, even if I go, I can only watch them attack the boss. Too boring. At this thought, Dake stopped completely. Then he quickly turned around and continued going up. Last year, I saw the boss of the 8th floor. This year, I'll target the final boss of the 9th floor, Bichimos. I remember that last year, Bichimos was summoned and killed by Senior Panduola. I wonder who will get it this year? Every year, after killing Bichimos, I'll get a small piece of Bichimos' horn. I hope that by this time next year, I'll also have the strength to fight for it. Dake made a goal in his heart and quickened his pace. Not long after, he arrived at the 8th floor of the castle. At this time, the number of juniors who were brave enough to go up to the higher floors was gradually increasing. Apart from the 8th and 9th floors, the upper floors had basically been cleared of monsters. As long as the juniors brought enough candy, they basically didn't have to worry about being attacked by monsters. What they needed to worry about were the other students in the carnival. The werewolf and vampire were still hunting for their prey. Spectre and witch were scheming for an opportunity. Phoenix was looking for an opportunity to be reborn. Titan was trying his best to maintain order. And Bichimos was looking for the boss. When the boss of the 7th floor was summoned, the bosses of the other floors were also successfully summoned. The masquerade party entered its most fervent moment. At this time, Dake chose to enter the 8th floor of the castle, which was still filled with danger. Then, he was immediately targeted by an 8-star common monster. Faced with 300 credits rushing towards him, Dake couldn't hold back for a moment. He used Bliss 3 and Fusion to summon the Basti Beast. The Basti Beast held the single scabbard and chopped the 8-star common monster to death on the spot. Then he looked at the summoned Basti Beast and decided to stay on the 8th floor for a while. 15 minutes was enough for the Basti Beast to find and kill 10 common 8-star monsters. That was a whole 3,000 credits. And in a moment of greed, Dake welcomed the last 15 minutes of the masquerade party on the 8th floor. He lightly counted the credits in his hands and couldn't help but feel regretful. There weren't that many monsters on the 8th floor. He only found 9 more. Together with the one at the beginning, he barely managed to gather 10 monsters. Wake me up a little more. After whispering in his ear, the Basti Beast gave him a final hug. Then it dispelled Fusion amidst the light. The little devil beast and the Diru Beast, who had separated, glared at each other. The Diru Beast instantly leaped away, and the little devil beast took the opportunity to jump into Dark's arms and made a face at the Diru Beast. The Diru Beast coldly snorted and looked away. Okay, stop messing around. Dake used Energy Potion to replenish the mana of the 2 magic guide fairies and then said, "Next, let's go to the 9th floor and try to avoid fighting." The magic guide fairies nodded, and each took a bunch of candy from his hand. Dake had never been to the 9th floor of the castle on the eve of Halloween. Most of his understanding of the 9th floor was obtained from his conversation with Panduola Sr. The 8th floor and the 9th floor were actually very similar. Only the top students or senior students were qualified to go to the 9th floor. The difficulty of this year's high level was higher than last year's. Even the top students would find it difficult to deal with the 9-star monsters on the 9th floor. After a little calculation of efficiency and consumption, one would find that the 9th floor wasn't a good choice. Therefore, theoretically speaking, there should be a large number of monsters left on the 9th floor. Entering the 9th floor under such circumstances, even if one brought a large amount of candy, it wouldn't be safe. The 9-star monsters had a large number of methods to prevent people from scattering the candy. But in the 9th floor, there was something that attracted the attention of the senior students. First, it was the resource points. The resource points on the 9th floor would definitely provide more credits and better resources. Although the difficulty of conquering it alone might be very high, if one succeeded, it would be a huge profit. Just this point alone was enough to attract the top students to take the risk. And the second attraction was the Bichimos horn. The Bichimos was the king of the beasts. In legends, it was a land monster that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Leviathan. Together with the Leviathan, they ruled over the land and the sea respectively. As the final boss of the masquerade ball, although the Bichimos, refined by the professors, wasn't as good as the legendary Bichimos, the Bichimos horn, used to refine it, was the genuine Bichimos horn. Every year on Halloween, the Shungmalian Academy would use a part of the Bichimos horn as the final reward. This was because the Academy possessed the one and only Bichimos horn in the world. That huge horn was still alive, even after being separated from the body of the Bichimos. Every year, the Academy would cut off a little bit of the Bichimos horn. Like flesh and blood, it would slowly heal and eventually recover to its original state. Even though the Bichimos horn had become very weak after being worn down for so many years. But even with just a small part of the Bichimos horn, It was still possible to refine a fourth step magical fairy. Fourth step, surpassing 9 stars. Without a doubt, this was the best trump card a student could obtain. Therefore, even if they had to stake it all, those top students among the senior students would still try their best to conquer the Bichimos. Under normal circumstances, they would even form a team to increase the success rate. Panduola being able to summon the Bichimos in the last 3 minutes of last year's event was actually largely due to luck. Of course, her ability to kill the Bichimos within 3 minutes was real. Dake stepped onto the 9th floor. Then the Dirk beast walking beside him reacted quickly and immediately threw out a handful of candies. The 2 monsters that had half of their heads popped out from the shadows in the corner immediately lost their desire to attack. "Let's go," the Dirk beast immediately said in a low voice. Then it took the lead and led Dake away from the entrance of the corridor. In the records of previous years, the Bichimos was summoned in the last 15 minutes or more. Therefore, Dake wasn't in a hurry. He also didn't have any plans to fight for the final boss this year. His purpose in coming to the 9th floor was only to observe and make preparations for next year. Merely 3 minutes after he entered the 9th floor, a violent tremor suddenly appeared somewhere on the 9th floor. The final boss had been summoned. 48/127, good morning. Although this month's update mission has been completed long ago, I still wrote 15,000 words today. It's the last day of October. For the sake of this lousy author who painstakingly writes for 32 hours every day, day and night, do a good deed and vote. _ Chapter 639. Roar. Bichimos. S roar tore through the night sky in an instant. The students who were immersed in their revelry were startled by this roar. They all raised their heads and looked towards the top of the castle. Other than the first-year newbies, almost all the students realized at the first moment that the final boss had been summoned. Deanna, who was strolling around the 6th floor with Luosi, immediately said excitedly, "Let's go and take a look too." Luosi touched his bag full of candies and nodded hesitantly. "Don't worry," Deanna said cheerfully. "Isn't there only about 10 minutes left before the event ends? It should be enough." "All right then," Luosi said. "Think about it carefully. We won't be in too much danger if we follow behind the seniors." "That's right," Deanna said happily. "Let's go. Perhaps we can see the final hunt." The students who had similar thoughts all walked towards the 9th floor of the castle, gradually forming a tide. Although the ghosts on the 9th floor were terrifying, the ghosts wandering around the castle all had a core setting of trick or treat. Remember the URL. VIP, can't you? 6 in other words, don't trick or treat if you give candy. The candies accumulated over the course of the night were the tickets for the students to watch the final boss battle. The top students who were originally on the 9th floor naturally ran towards the direction where Bichimos appeared at an even faster speed. According to the rules of the event over the years, as long as the group of students who summoned Bichimos failed in their crusade, the others could snatch it. At that time, the final boss would become an ownerless object. The huge amount of credits obtained after killing it would be divided equally according to the damage dealt. The gift box that would be dropped would belong to the person who dealt the most damage. In addition, the person who dealt the final blow to the final boss would receive double the amount of damage dealt. The students who came to fight for the final boss were all familiar with these rules. They also used candies to avoid the battle, and soon arrived at the southwest corner of the castle. The 3-man team that summoned Bichimos was engaged in a fierce battle with it. The speed at which Dark arrived here was slightly slower than the top students. However, thanks to this, his journey was quite smooth. When he arrived at his destination, the ceiling of the 9th floor of the castle had already been lifted. Looking up from here, he could even see the spiral clock tower. The hands of the minutes and seconds continued to move forward at a completely constant speed. There were only 10 minutes left before the event ended. He stopped in a corner and released the Dream Demon to guard the surroundings. Then he carefully observed the battle. The huge enchantment outside the castle blocked out the moonlight. The pitch-black rune dragon hovered close to the enchantment, and black smoke drifted around like clouds. The final boss named Bichimos stood proudly like a majestic mountain. This was the first time Dake had seen this giant beast with his own eyes. He immediately observed it carefully and compared it with what he had read in the books. Although it was slightly different from what was described in the books, there was no doubt that Bichimos was powerful. According to some legends, Bichimos was the largest creature on land, capable of devouring 1,000 mountain peaks every day. Although the size of this Bichimos wasn't that terrifying, it could still be considered a giant beast. Its tail was as straight as cedar wood, its muscles were as solid as stone, and its bones were as hard as steel. The magical fairy summoned by the three-man team at the beginning had surrounded and attacked it wildly, but it couldn't even penetrate its skin. Its huge body had tenacity that surpassed common sense. The terrifying curved horns on both sides of its head could pierce through any defense. The huge claws on its forelimbs could tear through any obstacle. Its angry roar could even create hurricanes. Dake couldn't help but feel shocked. At the same time, he quickly observed the three students surrounding Bichimos. It's the fifth-year, sixth-year dragon slayer of the Academy of Fools, Luke Beige. Luke Beige had a robust physique, but he wore thin clothes in the autumn night. Whether it was his physique or temperament, he was more like a student of the Academy of Knights. However, he did belong to the Academy of Fools. The other two people beside him should also be students of the Academy of Fools. One of the students wore a tight-fitting leather jacket with a leather whip at the back of his waist. He wore a half-purple butterfly mask on his face, looking like he was playing the role of some kind of queen. The other student wore a monkey jacket. The monkey tail behind his but was attached using some unknown method, allowing him to move nimbly. This woman and man were Luke Beige's regular team members. He's a dragon slayer after all. He shouldn't be defeated in the crusade against Bichimos, right? Dake thought rather relaxedly as he continued to observe the battlefield. Luke Beige's main force was a 9-star magical fairy, Mountain Giant. However, this Mountain Giant had almost never appeared on the dueling stage. Even during the dueling festival at Easter, Dake had never seen him summon it. Therefore, it was highly likely that he had recently refined it. Although the Mountain Giant was called a giant, it wasn't a demi-human, but an elemental. It was an amalgamation of rock-type energy, with rocks as hard as steel piled up all over its body. Although it wasn't as big as Bichimos when it stood up, it was almost as tall as Bichimos when it landed on all fours. It was by relying on this defensive Mountain Giant that Luke Beige was able to block the violent attacks of Bichimos. It was most likely related to why he had the idea of leading a team to fight the final boss. Above his head, a huge dragon-slaying sword was floating. That was his signature move, the cursed sword that had a powerful restraining effect against dragon types. It was of the same type as the Holy Sword curse. Therefore, he could treat it as a cursed sword during a duel, and he could control it himself. Although Bichimos wasn't a pure dragon type, it possessed a portion of dragon-type attributes. It had dragon scales on its back, giving it an extremely strong defense. If he used the dragon-slaying sword, he could shatter its dragon scales. This combination of attack and defense was the main method Luke Beige used to fight against Bichimos. As for his two companions, they were relatively weaker. Their main magic guide fairies were only 8 stars. However, they used a large number of strengthening methods to greatly increase the strength of their magical fairy, allowing them to confront Bichimos without falling into a disadvantageous position for the time being. In theory, Bichimos was only a 9-star single-use magical fairy. There wasn't a difference in hypostasis between the two sides. Most people would think so, right? A familiar and pleasant voice suddenly came from behind. Dake was wondering why Dream Demon didn't give him a warning when he saw the Panduola Senior walking out from behind him. She was holding Dream Demon with one hand and rubbing her face against Dake's. Dake couldn't help but roll his eyes. He then asked, "Senior, what do you think?" The Panduola Senior said in an experienced tone, "Last year, I went on a crusade against Bichimos and did a detailed investigation and research on Bichimos' horn. Later on, I discovered that Bichimos should be a type of illusionary god type, possessing the characteristic of hypostasis +1. Hypostasis +1? Dake's heart skipped a beat as he thought of the moon goddess. He said, Then in terms of hypostasis, it should belong to the fourth tier? When the hypostasis difference was too great, and it was an illusionary god type, even dream demons, same fate, might not be useful. Unfortunately, after the previous battle, most of the Great Sin cards were still on cooldown and couldn't be tested. It's like this. The Panduola Senior nodded. The hypostasis difference will cause some sure kill skills to be ineffective against it, or their effects will be weakened. Moreover, after its 3 attributes were specially strengthened, each of them surpassing 9-star perfection, it's extremely difficult to kill it. Dake smiled and said, "But Senior, haven't you killed it by yourself before?" Panduola raised her head slightly and smiled. "Of course, that's because I'm stronger than it." Dake watched as the battle reached its climax and asked, "Then in Senior's opinion, can Senior Luke Beige succeed?" Unfortunately, Panduola shook her head decisively. "That's why we have to start preparing now. When the mountain giant's defense is shattered, Luke Beige will be defeated." Dake asked doubtfully, "Us?" Panduola nodded and said, "Yes, us." A large number of students flew out of the castle's windows and landed on the top of the castle. They tried their best to stand at the edge of the roof, far away from the center of the battlefield. The pressure emanating from Bichimos made it hard for the weaker students to breathe. This made them realize that if they got too close, they might not be able to withstand the aftershocks of the battle. Deanna, Luo Si, Ai Ma, Sarah Dolong, White Luo Boat, Justin, many second-year students also mixed in. They watched from afar, their faces full of shock. Whether it was the final boss, Bichimos, or the mountain giant that blocked Bichimos' violent attacks, both made them feel awe and veneration. At this time, the professors also silently appeared on the roof or in the air. The final boss, Bichimos, was set to appear at the end of the battle because it was too powerful. If they were not careful, they could hurt the students. Therefore, every year at this time, professors would be arranged to protect the students. But this year, even more professors were only watching from a different location after they got addicted to watching the battle. Professor Lily sat in front of Professor Midia's carriage, her 2 little legs propped up as she watched the battle below, her eyes darting back and forth. Suddenly, her eyes lit up as she noticed little Dake standing side by side with Panduola Doragon. "Little Lily, who do you think will take down Bichimos this time?" Professor Midia, who was sitting on the other side, asked in a seemingly casual manner. "I don't know, but it's not Dake," Lily said with a smile. Midia couldn't help but shake her head helplessly. With Dake Diming's current strength, it was indeed impossible for him to take down Bichimos, but it wasn't like he didn't have a chance to perform. If he was lucky, he might even be able to obtain a scale or half a piece. As she thought of this, she lowered her head and looked down with a smile. On the spiral clock tower, the children who stayed behind to guard the castle, Agu Yubutaro, and Cupbear were all lying on the edge of the fence, watching excitedly. After being bored for an entire night, they finally felt a little bit like participating in a masquerade ball. When the final boss hunt was over, Xiong Bao could even sneak into the banquet hall on the first floor of the castle and pretend to be Dake's magical elf to attend the ball. Under the gazes of so many people, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed. After Bichimos was once again blocked by Mountain Giant, it suddenly stood up on its hind legs. When it was lying on the ground, it was already more than 10 meters tall. Now that it suddenly stood up like a human, it was even more terrifying. Those students of lower grades couldn't help but gasp and retreat. Luke Beige and the other 2 also had solemn gazes as they suddenly shouted. All kinds of magical radiance shot madly at Bichimos. The night sky that had turned dark due to the barrier was suddenly illuminated by these countless magical radiances. However, the dragon scales on Bichimos' back suddenly grew, covering its entire body at an extremely fast speed, including its softest abdomen. The newly grown dragon scales emitted a cold, pitch-black light, reflecting back most of the magical radiance. Bichimos raised its head and roared. A scarlet, dark, and scorching radiance erupted from its raised right claw. Then, as its body pounced forward, it viciously slapped down with its right claw. With an explosion that was louder than thunder, the mountain giant, that had been struggling for a few minutes, was smashed into pieces. Countless huge rocks were sent flying in all directions as a result. The students who were watching the battle from a closer distance immediately took action, blocking or obliterating the huge rocks. Large beads of sweat dripped down from Luc Beige's forehead. For a period of time, he was known as the pride of the House of Fools. However, after that momentary outburst, he was unable to maintain his rapid progress like his rival, Evernight Baron Noah Sharp. In the first semester of the 5th grade, he had gradually been unable to keep up with Evernight Baron Noah Sharp's footsteps. Therefore, he placed his final hope on Bichimo's horn, hoping that after obtaining Bichimo's horn, he would be able to refine a 4th-tier magic conducting sprite. Then, in the school championship competition of the 6th years, he would be able to make a complete turnaround. Although this was only a temporary solution and not a permanent solution, it was already the fastest way he could think of to improve his strength. However, tonight, with the support of his 2 companions, he finally cracked the mechanism and summoned the final boss, Bichimos. However, after that, he discovered that this Bichimos was much more powerful than he had expected. Last year, he had clearly observed it from a close distance. Last year, Bichimos was killed by the 4th-year Panduola Doragon within 3 minutes. As expected, I can't feel it if I don't personally participate in the battle. It wasn't until this year, when he stood in front of Bichimos, that the feeling of powerlessness slowly emerged. Luc Beige clenched his teeth and raised his hands towards the sky, as if he was holding the hilt of a sword. He tightly grabbed the dragon-slaying sword in the air. Ah! As if he wanted to pour out all the strength in his body, Luc Beige let out a frantic cry. Then he poured all his magic power into the dragon-slaying sword, and controlled it to hack down heavily. Bang! Bichimo's huge curved horn was smashed open by this sword strike, leaving a huge hole in it. Black smoke surged out from this gap. Roar! Bichimos let out an extremely furious roar because of this strike. Ha ha! Looking at the unprecedentedly furious Bichimos, Luc Beige let out a brisk laugh. As for his 2 companions, after calmly confirming that the crusade had failed, they suddenly pulled him back. It's here! The upperclassmen who had been prepared for a long time all let out the same sound in their hearts. Their faces were filled with joy. At that moment, the needle on the spiral clock tower had just turned to 11:55. There were still a full 5 minutes left. There was simply too much time. Luc Beige's team of 3 didn't stubbornly refuse to retreat. They were a great help. It's time for us to take over. Evernight Baron Noah Sharp took off the mask on his face and threw it out. When the mask was blown back by the wind, the sacrificial summoning that he had long prepared was activated on the spot. Several white lights flew into the sacrificial summoning array. The crimson spine black dragon rushed out of the summoning array with a furious roar. Noah Sharp flung the corner of his clothes. The magic card in his hand shone faintly. His body disappeared into thin air, and suddenly appeared on the back of the crimson spine black dragon. Although the crimson spine black dragon was still not as big as Bichimos in terms of size, its terrifying draconic aura, which carried a dense aura of darkness, made its aura unstoppable. Almost at the same time, dozens of different summoning arrays lit up around them. The upperclassmen were either summoning their main forces, activating their secret instruments, or casting various strengthening spells. A radiance that was brighter than the previous volley of magical light illuminated the entire roof of the castle. The fluctuation of magic power rose rapidly and spread in all directions. Whoa! Another roar that carried a terrifying draconic aura rushed into the sky. On the other side of Bichimos, a pure white dragon with a body as slender as a snake flew out from the special summoning array at high speed. With a light leap, the Panduola landed on the dragon's neck. The celestial white dragon was nearly 20 meters long. Its snow-white scales looked delicate and soft, but in fact, they were incomparably tough. Its jade-like antlers emitted a gentle white light. Its gentle and beautiful body was intoxicating. However, it was this white dragon that killed Bichimos from last year within 3 minutes. The students who surged forward were immediately alerted when they saw the white dragon. They shouted loudly and gave it their all. Everyone knew that if they did not give it their all, the Silver Dragon Lady alone would be able to kill Bichimos on the spot. Needless to say, the crimson spine black dragon of the Evernight Baron had also appeared. If they did not give it their all, they might not even get to drink the soup. When everyone's gazes were drawn away by the celestial white dragon that soared into the sky. However, they did not notice that below the 9th floor, a white dragon with green eyes that was as pure as the celestial white dragon's aura of light had also soared into the sky. On the back of this white dragon, whose scales were covered with green veins, was a slender silver-white humanoid magic elf. Moon God. It was riding on the back of the white dragon. Dake originally did not intend to participate in this battle for the final boss. However, Senior Panduola wanted him to ride the celestial white dragon and fight together with her. Of course, he would not let her succeed. If he really agreed to the so-called fight together, he would only be in a supporting position. There would then be a difference in status between the two of them. Dake naturally would not let this happen. Therefore, he decided to join the battle. He also made a bet with Senior Panduola while he was at it. They were competing to see who could inflict the most damage on Bichimos. Although Dake did not believe that he could suppress Senior Panduola, sometimes losing a bet and owing a debt was also a strategy. However, when he boasted, he was also prepared to give it his all. With Halloween approaching, the fanatical atmosphere of so many people besieging a gigantic beast could not help but be immersed in it. Go Cyan Eyes White Dragon. Destructive jet of white light. When Cyan Eyes White Dragon flew into the sky, Dake suddenly pointed his finger at Bichimos, which was emitting an even more ferocious aura. Faced with the encirclement of so many people, the terrifying gigantic beast once again stood on 2 legs. Its huge claws shrouded in scarlet radiance seemed to tear space apart as it fiercely swung out, leaving bloody afterimages in the air. The magical fairies who were unable to dodge in time were slapped by the huge claws, dying on the spot. Even 8-star magical fairies were unable to resist this terrifying huge claw. The wind radiating from the claws caused the surrounding magical fairies to scatter in panic. Having adopted the correct strategy, Dake Dimming did not approach. Instead, he ordered Cyan Eyes White Dragon to continuously jet out destructive white light. A mere 7-star Cyan Eyes White Dragon might not be able to cause too much damage to Bichimos. However, dripping water could penetrate stone. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Bichimos possessed the ability to rapidly regenerate. If the damage dealt to it could not keep up with the speed of its regeneration, it would never be able to be killed. After Dake ordered Cyan Eyes White Dragon to continue attacking, he immediately drew upon the moonlight and summoned Lunar Eclipse. 12 lunar eclipse beams, their power multiplied under the moonlight, blasted towards Bichimos' head amidst a large number of attacks. On the other hand, the 2 9-star dragon species in the field charged towards Bichimos without the slightest bit of fear. The redback black dragon's eyes were scarlet red. Its sharp claws shone with a scarlet radiance just like Bichimos' huge claws. Its claws actually tore apart Bichimos' tough dragon scales and left bloody wounds on its body. As a matter of fact, Noah Sharp had added some powder from Bichimos' horn into his redback black dragon when he was refining it. Under the convergence of many factors, this redback black dragon was born. On the other hand, Panduola Doragon's sky white dragon suddenly opened its mouth and shot out a rapidly converging white light. The white light accurately hit Bichimos' hind leg, almost piercing through it. The terrifying power left the spectators speechless. Compared to that, Cyan Eyes White Dragon's destructive white light paled in comparison. They were completely incomparable. However, the difference in star class led to the difference in the power of the Surekill skill. After summoning Lunar Eclipse, Dake pressed the Moon God Stone on his chest. Under the cover of the blazing white light, no student saw this scene. Even those who did not know Dake well thought that the Moon God, riding on the back of Cyan Eyes White Dragon, was his magical fairy. The corner of his mouth curled up, revealing an excited smile. It was not bad that Night God Tiger chose to make its debut at this moment. 3 seconds later, the Moon God Stone appeared in his hand. He slowly pressed the stone into the heart protection mirror on his chest. Then, a dazzling silver light erupted from the heart protection mirror, gradually engulfing his evolved body. After he became a luminous body, his body was rapidly changing under the light of evolution. The moment power erupted from the body, it was always so intoxicating. He stood up from the back of Cyanai's white dragon. The silver-white armor that originated from the moon god armor separated from his body one by one and floated around him. The armor on his head suddenly turned into the appearance of a tiger under the dazzling white light. And the armor on his limbs also grew sharp tiger claws. On his body, the layers of armor became thicker. A long silver-white metal tail suddenly elongated and floated in the air. He suddenly opened his arms, and all the armor stuck close to him. Roar! It was as if a roar was born from the bottom of his heart. Dake suddenly jumped off the dragon's back, relying on the moon god armor's floating ability to run in the void. The terrifying power that seemed to want to engulf him almost burst out from his body. He evolved from moon god to night god tiger. Although night god tiger was still only a 7-star, the sure kill skill god personality armament increased its magic power, attack, and defense by 1,000 points. It was not lower than a 9-star magic elf. As for the necessary hypostasis +1, it also possessed the hypostasis of the 4th tier. In other words, he was already standing on the same level as Bichimos. He was fearless. Dake charged towards Bichimos' huge body. Amidst the continuous rumbling in his ears, he felt his blood boiling for the first time. The excitement and joy brought about by joining a battle of this level after his evolution was a different kind of feeling. Moon Tiger God's Descent. As Dake Diming's figure charged over, Dake used the Surekill skill, Moon Tiger God's Descent, for the first time. It was meaningless to analyze the power of the Surekill skill from the data level. Only when it was used in a head-on battle could its power be verified. Dake could clearly feel that the magic power of Night God Tiger decreased by more than 1/10 the moment it used the Surekill skill. And this 1/10 of its magic power transformed into Moon Tiger. Above its head, it was a silver-white divine beast that was very similar to his god personality armament, but it was not mechanized. Its size was only slightly inferior to Bichimos. When this huge creature appeared, the students finally couldn't help but cast their gazes over. Almost everyone subconsciously treated it as a powerful magic elf that was not inferior to Redridge Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon. Card name Moon Tiger. Attribute Dark Magic Power. 450 attack, 10,000 defense, 9,000 Surekill skill. Moon Tiger Roar None. The magic power of Moon Tiger was only 1/10 of Night God Tiger's God Personality Armament. Attribute bonus to Night God Tiger was the same as Divine Holy Ring. It was a basic bonus from the inside out. And Moon Tiger's attack and defense were 2 times that of Night God Tiger's. This caused the Divine Beast's attack power to reach an extremely terrifying 10,000 points in terms of statistics. And its defense was also a full 9,000 points. Even an extraordinary 9-star magic elf would find it difficult to break through its defense, unless it used a Surekill skill that at least doubled its attack power. And such a Moon Tiger could be released at the same time when Night God Tiger released Moon Tiger Roar. When this divine beast was summoned, even Panduola, who was riding on Sky White Dragon, couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. But immediately after, her expression turned serious. At this moment, she suddenly realized that when she made the bet with her junior, he wasn't bluffing. If I'm not careful, I might lose? She smiled, her smile bright and beautiful. It was even more beautiful than the moon. After summoning Moon Tiger, Dake released Moon Tiger Roar, without hesitation. This was also the first time he tried to release this Surekill skill. And Bichimos was the best test subject. Of course, it was best to save this kind of ultimate skill for last to maximize its effectiveness. But Moon Tiger's summoning could only last for 30 seconds. Even if it could be doubled under the moonlight, it would only last for 1 minute. And Bichimos, which could shatter an 8-star magic elf with 1 claw, could even break through Moon Tiger's defense. Therefore, releasing it immediately to stack the damage was actually the wisest choice. Dake didn't let Night God Tiger's bestial nature take away his thoughts. He followed the guidance of the Sure-Kill skill and opened his mouth abruptly. Moon Tiger, which was standing in the air, opened its bloody mouth at the same time. Then, from its mouth and Moon Tiger's mouth, tiger-shaped shockwaves that were almost as big as their bodies were shot out at the same time. 2 shockwaves, one small and one large, emitting a terrifying aura, hit Bichimo's side without any hindrance. Boom boom. 2 consecutive explosions rang out. The huge Bichimos was actually blown to the side. The scene was so shocking that even the upperclassmen who were surrounding Bichimos were almost stunned. Bichimos, who had collapsed with a loud bang, however, immediately got back to his feet despite being heavily injured. Then it suddenly inhaled. Countless black streams of air surged in from all directions, converging into a vortex that resembled a black hole in its mouth. Spread out. Evernight Baron Noah Sharp's shout suddenly rang out. The upperclassmen who had long since understood the attack pattern of this final boss immediately controlled their magic elves to spread out in all directions, ready to dodge or defend at any time. But Bichimos slowly turned its head towards Night God Tiger and Moon Tiger that were floating in the air. Beast God Cannon? Dake's mind moved, and he suddenly pointed at the Moon God mirror on his chest. Perfect, let's see how high the upper limit of Moon God mirror is. Under the armor, Dake's face flushed red like blood. He had a strand of Blessing of the Wind Elf hidden in his ear. He also had a fairy puppet on him. This wasn't a foolhardy act. When Bichimos' Beast God Cannon finished charging, it suddenly shot out. Moon Tiger quickly dodged under his command, but he himself stood in the air, not moving at all. A layer of silver-white radiance circulated around his body, and the silver-white armor on his body instantly turned into a complete mirror. The next moment, the spiral-like pitch-black beam of light crossed the distance between them and hit Dake Dimming in an instant. Professor Li, who was sitting on the pumpkin carriage, couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Several professors who were eager to attack instantly stopped their actions. Under countless gazes, Bichimos' Beast God Cannon completely engulfed Night God Tiger. But in the next moment, the silver-white moonlight erupted. After the Beast God Cannon dissipated, a Beast God Cannon that was much smaller than Bichimos' Beast God Cannon, but the size of Night God Tiger, was suddenly shot back. Bichimos probably didn't expect that its killing move would be reflected. It didn't dodge at all, and a bloody hole was pierced through its body. Then, Moon Tiger suddenly pounced on it, pressed its body down and bit it. After being stunned for a moment, the surrounding students immediately shouted. Their magical fairy once again released all kinds of killing moves, shooting at Bichimos, with the momentum of wanting to engulf it. The Redback Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon also continued to attack without pause. Bichimos finally let out a painful howl. It's time. Dake narrowed his eyes, estimating the time. The mirror-like armor on his body had dimmed, and the moonlight energy stored in the Moon God Mirror had been exhausted. Although Full Moon Mirror could last for 30 seconds, if the moonlight energy was released within 30 seconds, it would naturally lose its effect. The moonlight passed through the barrier and was attracted to Night God Tiger, slowly replenishing the depletion of the Moon God Mirror. After returning, he would have to let the Moon God's soul bask in the moonlight more. Dake suddenly said in a low voice, Cyan Eyes White Dragon. Killing move, Cyan Eyes Incarnation. Roar. The Cyan Eyes White Dragon, whose radiance was completely overshadowed by the Redback Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon, let out an impassioned dragon roar at this moment. Its desire to battle was also aroused by the atmosphere before its eyes. It was even aroused by the Redback Black Dragon and the Sky White Dragon. The Cyan Eyes White Dragon suddenly spread its wings, and white light erupted from its chest and covered its entire body in the blink of an eye. The outline of its body suddenly swelled, and the green veins on its body faded away at a speed visible to the naked eye. A pure white dragon species with only green eyes was instantly revealed amidst the gathering of white light. Dake raised his right hand again, and then chopped down with all his might, shouting, Destructive spray of white light. An even larger and thicker beam of white light of destruction shot towards Bichimos, who had been knocked down by the Moon Tiger. After using Cyan Eye's incarnation, the Cyan Eye's white dragon could temporarily transform into a Cyan Eye's white dragon, gaining all attributes apart from its killing move. However, it didn't have a killing move, but it still retained the Cyan Eye's white dragon's killing move. Naturally, this destructive spray of white light could be shot out once every 3 seconds. It could be shot out 10 times in 30 seconds. However, after transforming into a 9-star Cyan Eye's white dragon, with great difficulty, it couldn't continue hiding behind and shooting out beams of light. For dragons, biting with their teeth, tearing with their claws, and whipping with their tails was the nature hidden deep within their hearts. Although pure-blooded dragons were highly intelligent life forms, their bestial nature wasn't weak at all. It was just that their arrogance and intelligence were suppressed deep within their hearts. Therefore, when pure-blooded dragons were transformed into demonic dragons by the demons, they would gain even greater strength due to the explosive nature of their nature. The Cyan Eye's white dragon pounced towards Bichimos. While biting and tangling, it shot out white light at the closest distance. Dake himself also summoned Single Scabbard and seized the opportunity to pounce. However, he was more agile and nimble, so he wouldn't really fight head-on. Time trickled by. The Moon Tiger, that was engaged in close combat with Bichimos, didn't even last until the 1-minute duration ended. After 30 seconds, its defense was broken through. Its mere 450 points of magic power was as fragile as a thin piece of paper. After Moon Tiger left the field, the most eye-catching creatures were the 3 9-star dragons. The Dark type, Redback Black Dragon. The Light type, Celestial White Dragon. And the Light type, Cyan Eye's White Dragon. The 3 dragons danced wildly in the air, making this Halloween masquerade ball even more dazzling. However, the Cyan Eye's White Dragon only appeared for 30 seconds before it turned back into a Cyan Eye's White Dragon. Not long after, the Redback Black Dragon and Celestial White Dragon launched their attacks at the same time, completely ending the life of the final boss, Bichimos. Boom. When Bichimos' body exploded into magic power light spots and shot into the sky like fireworks, enthusiastic cheers rang out from the top of the castle. The clock chimed silently amidst the continuous cheers. Dong! Dake walked towards the corner of the 9th floor of the castle amidst the cheers. The silver armor on his body quickly disintegrated, and he transformed back into a vampire. The Cyan Eye's White Dragon, which didn't have much magic power left, had also returned to the magic card. He slowed down his pace and the flush on his face slowly receded. When Bichimos' life was ended, he received a huge amount of credits that shocked him. He couldn't help but smile at this amount of credits. After Panduola received the gift box, she jumped off the dragon's back under Noah Sharp's murderous gaze. The Celestial White Dragon turned into a white light and followed her into the magic card. She walked to Dake's side with a gentle smile. Dake turned his face and said softly, "Senior, why aren't you wearing a bridal gown this year?" A 51/127. October is finally over. Although I've encountered many terrible things this month, I still managed to write 200,000 words. Today is still the same. I beg for a guaranteed monthly ticket and a guaranteed blade. Happy Halloween. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.